The envelope hit the floor at the exact moment Ethan Cole's world was supposed to fall apart. He was already 20 minutes late for daycare pickup, his phone buzzing with the third overdraft notice that week, when he crashed into her in the hallway of the Cascade Tower. She was all sharp edges and expensive perfume, the kind of woman who didn't look at men like him. But when he handed back that envelope without asking for a reward, something shifted in her ice blue eyes. 3 days later, she offered him a deal that would either save his life or destroy what was left of it. Marry me for 1 year, and I'll erase every debt you have. The only catch? It had to look real enough to fool everyone, including the brother who wanted her empire and the daughter who still asked when mommy was coming home. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to follow this story all the way to the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see just how far this tale travels. Now, let's begin. The fluorescent lights in the basement maintenance corridor of Cascade Tower flickered twice before surrendering to darkness. Ethan Cole didn't notice. He was moving on autopilot, his mind split between the stack of past-due medical bills crammed in his locker and the fact that Sophie's daycare closed in exactly 19 minutes. His daughter didn't understand late fees. She only understood that sometimes Daddy didn't make it in time, and she had to wait in the office with Mrs. Chen, watching the other kids leave with their smiling, on-time parents. He rounded the corner at a near jog, his maintenance uniform still damp from fixing a burst pipe on the 14th floor, and that's when the collision happened. One moment he was alone in the service hallway. The next, he was chest to shoulder with a woman in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his rent, and a cream-colored envelope was spinning through the air like a playing card. "I'm sorry, I didn't see," Ethan started, already bending to retrieve the envelope. Clearly, her voice was clipped, professional, with an edge that suggested she was used to people getting out of her way. Ethan picked up the envelope and straightened, getting his first real look at her. Mid-30s, maybe. Blonde hair pulled back so tight it could have been a weapon. Eyes the color of a winter sky, pale blue and utterly unimpressed. She stood maybe 5'7" in heels that clicked against the concrete like a countdown timer. "Here," he said, extending the envelope. She took it without a word, her gaze already moving past him, dismissing him. Then she paused. Her eyes dropped to his name badge, then to his face, and something flickered there. Curiosity, maybe, or calculation. "You work maintenance?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "How long have you been in this building?" Ethan glanced at his watch. 16 minutes. 3 years. "Look, I don't mean to be rude, but I really need to. I'm Lena Harrington." She said it like it should mean something. It did. Ethan had seen her name on the building directory, on the brass plaques in the lobby, on the business news alerts that occasionally lit up the break room TV. Harrington Media Group occupied floors 20 through 32. Lena Harrington was the CEO, the daughter of the founder, the woman who'd taken over when her father died 2 years ago and turned a legacy company into something sharper, leaner, more dangerous. "Nice to meet you," Ethan said, because what else do you say when the woman who probably paid your salary was standing 3 feet away? "I really do need to go, though. My daughter—" "Wait." Lena reached into her bag, a slim leather thing that probably had its own insurance policy, and pulled out her wallet. "For your trouble." She extended $200 bills. Ethan stared at them. He thought about Sophie's daycare bill, about the pediatrician's office that had stopped accepting his promises, about the envelope in his own locker that contained a second notice from the mortgage company about his late wife's medical liens against their apartment. $200 wouldn't fix any of it, but it would buy groceries for 2 weeks. "No, thank you," he heard himself say. Lena's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. "Excuse me? I didn't do anything worth $200. I picked up something I knocked down. That's just being a decent person." Ethan took a step back. "But thank you, and I really am sorry about running into you." He turned and walked away, feeling her eyes on his back the entire length of the hallway. When he hit the stairs, the elevator would take too long. He let himself wonder briefly if he'd just made the dumbest decision of his life. 14 minutes later, he burst through the doors of Little Sprouts Daycare with 2 minutes to spare. Sophie was sitting in the reading corner, her dark curls escaping from the ponytail he'd wrestled into place that morning, her face buried in a picture book about dinosaurs. Daddy! She launched herself at him with the unself-conscious joy of a 4-year-old who hadn't yet learned to be disappointed by the world. Ethan caught her, buried his face in her hair, and let himself breathe for the first time since the collision. Hey, baby girl, sorry I'm cutting it close. It's okay. Mrs. Chen let me read the T-Rex book again. Sophie pulled back, her brown eyes, her mother's eyes, shining. Did you know that T-Rex had teeth as big as bananas? I did not know that, Ethan said, signing her out with the tired woman at the front desk. You'll have to tell me all about it on the way home. Home was a third-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better decades, 15 minutes by bus from the gleaming financial district where Cascade Tower stood. The apartment was too small and too expensive, but it was Sophie's home, the only one she remembered. Emma had died here, in their bedroom, with hospice nurses and the smell of lavender oil and Ethan holding her hand as she slipped away from the cancer that had eaten through their savings and their future. That had been 18 months ago. Sometimes it felt like yesterday. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime. While Sophie arranged her plastic dinosaurs on the coffee table, Ethan heated up leftover mac and cheese and tried not to look at the stack of bills on the kitchen counter. He'd gotten good at not looking. If he didn't open them, they couldn't hurt him. Magical thinking, the grief counselor had called it, back when Ethan could still afford grief counseling. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Probably a debt collector. Ethan almost declined the call, but Sophie was watching him with those big, trusting eyes, and he'd made a promise to her after Emma died. No more hiding. Whatever came, they'd face it together. Hello? Mr. Cole, this is Lena Harrington. We met earlier today. Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. Ms. Harrington, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I imagine not. Her voice was different over the phone. Warmer, maybe, or just more human without the echo of the maintenance corridor. I have a proposition for you. Are you free tomorrow morning, 6 a.m.? 6 a.m.? Ethan repeated. Sophie looked up from her dinosaurs, frowning. That's before my shift starts. I'm aware of your schedule, Mr. Cole. I pulled your employee file. Of course she did. Why? Because you're either the most honest man in Seattle or the most foolish. I'd like to determine which. There was a pause, and Ethan could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background, the hum of a city that never quite slept. Cascade Tower, penthouse level. The security guard will have your name. Don't be late. She hung up before he could ask any of the 100 questions crowding his throat. Sophie tugged on his sleeve. Who was that, Daddy? Just someone from work, sweetheart. Ethan crouched down next to her dinosaur civilization, forcing a smile. Hey, what do you say we have ice cream for dessert tonight? Really? Sophie's whole face lit up. Even though it's a school night? Even though it's a school night. They ate chocolate chip ice cream straight from the container while Sophie explained the complex social dynamics of the late Cretaceous period. Ethan listened and laughed and tried not to think about the phone call, about the woman with ice blue eyes who'd pulled his employee file like she was researching a business acquisition. That night, after Sophie was asleep, curled up in her twin bed surrounded by stuffed animals and dinosaur books, Ethan stood at his bedroom window and looked out at the Seattle skyline. Cascade Tower was visible from here, a blade of glass and steel that caught the city lights and threw them back like a challenge. 6 a.m. penthouse level. He should ignore it. He should show up for his regular shift at 7:30, fix the broken elevator on 9, and forget that Lena Harrington existed outside the abstract concept of management. But $200. She'd tried to give him $200 for picking up an envelope, and he'd said no. The most honest man in Seattle, or the most foolish. Ethan thought about Emma, about the promises he'd made to her in those final days. Take care of Sophie. Don't let the bills bury you. Find a way to live, not just survive. He set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. The penthouse elevator required a key card. The security guard, a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a knowing smile, handed it to Ethan at 5:47 a.m. and said, "She's expecting you, 32nd floor." Ethan rode up in silence, watching the floor numbers climb. The elevator was all mirrors and soft lighting, the kind of space that made his worn jeans and cleanest flannel shirt look exactly as out of place as they were. The doors opened onto a private foyer, marble floors, a single orchid on a glass table. And Lena Harrington, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows in black yoga pants and a loose white shirt, holding a cup of coffee and watching the sunrise paint the city gold. "You're early," she said, without turning around. "You said not to be late." Most people interpret that as arrive exactly on time. Lena turned to face him, and Ethan saw that without the armor of a business suit, she looked younger, tired, almost vulnerable. "Coffee? Please." She poured him a cup from a machine that probably cost more than his car, if he'd had a car. The coffee was perfect, rich and dark, and complex in a way that made the break room sludge at work seem like a distant memory of coffee. "Sit," Lena said, gesturing to the white sofa that faced the windows. Ethan sat. Lena didn't. She stood with her back to the sunrise, silhouetted against the morning light, and studied him like he was a contract she was trying to decipher. "I'm going to be direct, Mr. Cole, because I don't have time to waste, and I suspect you don't either." She set her coffee down on the glass table with a soft click. "I need a husband. 1 year, contractual terms. At the end of that year, we divorce. You walk away with enough money to clear every debt you have, and I retain control of my company." Ethan's brain stalled somewhere between husband and contractual terms. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. "Did you just propose to me?" "Propose implies romance. This is a business transaction." Lena's expression didn't change. "My father's will contains a clause that requires me to be married before my 36th birthday in order to maintain majority control of Harrington Media Group. That birthday is in 8 weeks. My younger brother Gavin is currently positioning himself to take over if I fail to meet that requirement. He would destroy everything my father built within a year." "Why me?" Ethan asked. "You're... you. You could marry anyone. Anyone I know would have ulterior motives, business connections, social climbing, genuine romantic interest." Lena said the last phrase like it was a communicable disease. "You, on the other hand, turned down $200. You either have integrity or you're too proud for your own good. Either quality works in my favor." Ethan set his coffee cup down because his hands had started shaking. "You pulled my employee file." "I did. Single father, widowed 18 months ago. Approximately $87,000 in medical debt from your late wife's cancer treatment, plus another $42,000 in associated costs. You make $38,000 a year as a maintenance worker. You're drowning, Mr. Cole. I'm offering you a life raft." The numbers hit like punches. Ethan had stopped counting the debt months ago because counting made it real, made it impossible, made it a monster he couldn't fight. "What's in it for you?" he asked quietly. "Control of my company, my legacy, my life's work." Lena's voice was steady, but something flickered in her eyes, something that looked almost like desperation. "My father built Harrington Media from nothing. I've spent the last 2 years expanding it, modernizing it, making it matter. Gavin wants to sell it off piece by piece to the highest bidder. I won't let that happen. And if I say no, then I find someone else, though I doubt I'll find anyone more suitable in the time I have left." Lena picked up a folder from the side table and handed it to him. "This is the contract. Read it. Take it to a lawyer if you want, though I'll cover those fees. If you agree, we'll begin immediately. If not, this conversation never happened." Ethan opened the folder with numb fingers. The contract was dense, full of legal language that would take hours to parse. But certain phrases jumped out at him. Term of marriage. 1 calendar year from date of legal wedding. Cohabitation required in primary residence, penthouse, Cascade Tower. Public appearances as married couple. Minimum twice monthly. Financial compensation upon completion of term, $150,000 plus debt elimination. Confidentiality agreement. Permanent $150,000, Ethan said aloud, plus debt elimination. "That comes to approximately $280,000, Lena said. "More than enough to start over, put your daughter through college, live without drowning." "So, Sveta." Ethan's chest tightened. "My daughter, where does she fit in this?" "She lives with us. I've allocated space for her, a bedroom, play area, proximity to excellent schools. Childcare arrangements will be covered. She'll want for nothing." "She'll want her mother." The words came out harder than Ethan intended. "She's 4 years old. She's lost enough. For the first time, Lena's expression softened. I'm not trying to replace her mother, Mr. Cole. I'm offering stability, security, a chance for both of you to stop fighting just to survive. Ethan looked down at the contract again. The numbers blurred. He thought about Sophie asking why they couldn't go to the zoo anymore, why birthday parties meant homemade cake instead of the bakery kind, why Daddy always looked so tired. He thought about Emma, about the promise he'd made, find a way to live. I need time to think about it, he said. You have 24 hours. Lena crossed to a desk and pulled out a business card. My personal cell number. Call me by 6 a.m. tomorrow with your answer. Ethan took the card. His fingers brushed hers, and he felt the cold of her skin, the fine tremor that suggested she wasn't quite as composed as she appeared. Why are you really doing this? He asked. The truth, not the business answer. Lena met his eyes, and for just a moment the CEO disappeared and he saw the woman underneath, exhausted, cornered, fighting a battle she couldn't afford to lose. Because I'd rather marry a stranger with integrity than watch my brother destroy my father's legacy with a smile on his face, she said quietly. Because I've spent my entire life being told I'm not enough, not male enough, not ruthless enough, not willing to play the games men play. This clause in the will? It's my father's final test, and I refuse to fail it, even if it means this. She gestured between them, this impossible thing she was proposing. Ethan stood. The contract felt heavy in his hands, like it had its own gravity. I'll call you tomorrow. 6 a.m., Mr. Cole. Not a minute later. He rode the elevator down in silence, emerged into the pre-dawn chill of Seattle, and walked the 16 blocks home because he needed time to think and couldn't afford the bus fare anyway. Sophie was still asleep when he got back. Ethan stood in her doorway and watched her breathe, this small, perfect person who trusted him to make the right choices, who believed Daddy could fix anything. What would Emma say? He didn't have to guess. She'd said it, in those final weeks when the morphine made her honest and the fear made her desperate. Promise me you'll find a way to be happy again. Promise me you won't just survive. This wasn't happiness. But it was a way out of the drowning. Ethan spent the day going through his regular routine, fixing a faulty heating unit, repairing water damage in an executive bathroom, replacing fluorescent bulbs in the parking garage. Every hour, he felt the weight of Lena's business card in his pocket. Every hour, he thought about the number, $280,000. At lunch, he called the one person he trusted more than anyone, his sister, Rachel. You're going to think I'm insane, he said, standing in the alley behind Cascade Tower with a half-eaten sandwich in his hand. I already think you're insane, Rachel said. You're a single dad working 60-hour weeks for poverty wages in one of the most expensive cities in America. What fresh insanity are you considering? Ethan told her everything, the collision, the phone call, the contract. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Ethan, Rachel said finally, this is either the best opportunity you'll ever get or the worst mistake of your life. That's helpful, thanks. I'm serious. On paper, it's perfect. You get out of debt, Sophie gets stability, and you're helping someone who's clearly desperate. But you're also talking about lying to everyone, living with a stranger, and faking a marriage for a year. That's not nothing. I know. What does your gut say? Ethan thought about Lena standing in front of the sunrise, about the tremor in her hands when she'd given him her card, about the way she'd looked when she talked about her father's legacy. My gut says she's telling the truth, he said slowly. About needing help. About the brother. About all of it. Then the question is, can you live with this for a year? Can Sophie? Sophie won't know. Nobody can know. That's part of the contract. Rachel sighed. You realize you're talking about teaching your daughter that it's okay to lie if the payoff is big enough, right? I'm talking about teaching my daughter that sometimes you have to make hard choices to survive. Ethan's voice came out rougher than he intended. Emma and I did everything right, Rach. We had insurance, we saved, we were responsible, and she still died drowning in medical bills, and I'm still here trying to figure out how to pay for Sophie's antibiotics and her daycare and the roof over our heads. So yeah, maybe this is a lie, but it's a lie that buys us a future. Okay, Rachel said softly. Okay, then I think you already know what you're going to do. She was right. Ethan had known since the moment Lena explained why she was doing this. Maybe earlier, maybe from the moment she'd offered him that money and he'd said no, setting in motion whatever cosmic chain of events had led to this impossible offer. That night, after Sophie was in bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and read the contract word by word. It was thorough, ironclad. There were clauses for breach of contract, for public scandal, for what happened if either of them developed romantic or sexual feelings for the other. That one made him laugh, a short, bitter sound that died quickly in the empty apartment, as if falling for your fake wife was the most ridiculous thing about this situation. At 5:58 a.m. the next morning, Ethan dialed Lena's number. She answered on the first ring. "Mr. Cole?" "I have conditions," Ethan said. He could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm listening." "Sophie comes first, always. If anything in this arrangement threatens her safety or her happiness, it ends immediately. I don't care about the money." "Agreed." "I want it in writing that you'll never ask me to lie directly to her about who you are or what this is. She's too young to understand the details, but I won't teach her that deception is acceptable. We can frame it as Daddy's new friend who we're helping, close to the truth." "Close enough." Ethan took a breath. "And when this is over, when we divorce, I want your word that there won't be any legal complications. Sophie doesn't need to lose another person she's gotten attached to." There was a pause. When Lena spoke again, her voice was softer. "You're a good father, Mr. Cole. I'm a desperate one. There's a difference." "Sometimes there isn't." He could hear her moving, the rustle of papers. "I agree to your conditions. My lawyer will add amendments to the contract by end of business today. Can you come by the penthouse tomorrow evening? We should discuss logistics before we begin." "Tomorrow's Saturday. I have Sophie." "Bring her. She should see where she'll be living." The words hit Ethan like cold water. Where she'll be living. This was really happening. He was really going to uproot his daughter's life, move into a penthouse with a woman he'd met twice, and pretend to be in love for a year. "Okay," he said. 6 p.m.? Perfect. "Oh, and Mr. Cole? We should probably start using first names. Ethan." "Lena," he said, testing the name in his mouth. "Tomorrow, then." She hung up, and Ethan sat in his dark kitchen as the sun rose over Seattle, wondering if he'd just made a deal with the devil or found an unlikely angel. 24 hours later, he stood outside the penthouse elevator with Sophie's hand in his and a backpack full of her favorite things slung over his shoulder. His daughter was practically vibrating with excitement. Ethan had told her they were visiting Daddy's new friend who lived in a really tall building with a great view. "Is it taller than the Space Needle?" Sophie asked for the third time. "Almost," Ethan said, swiping the key card the security guard had given him. The elevator doors opened directly into Lena's foyer. She was waiting for them, and Ethan felt his breath catch. She'd traded the business suits and yoga pants for dark jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked almost normal, approachable. "You must be Sophie," Lena said, crouching down to Sophie's eye level. "I've heard a lot about you." Sophie, who was normally shy around strangers, studied Lena with the serious intensity of a 4-year-old sizing up a potential playmate. "Do you like dinosaurs?" "I don't know much about them," Lena admitted, "but I'd love to learn." "I can teach you." Sophie lit up. "Did you know that the stegosaurus had a brain the size of a walnut?" "I did not know that. That's fascinating." Ethan watched the exchange with something like wonder. Lena's smile looked genuine. Tentative, maybe, like she was out of practice, but genuine. She stood and caught his eye, and something passed between them. An understanding, maybe. Or just the shared acknowledgement that they were about to do something completely insane. "Would you like a tour?" Lena asked Sophie. "Yes, please." The penthouse was massive. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, an open-concept living space with those floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But what made Sophie gasp wasn't the luxury. It was the smaller bedroom at the end of the hall, the one Lena had clearly prepared specifically for a 4-year-old. The walls were painted a soft sage green. There was a twin bed with a white frame, a bookshelf already filled with picture books, and Sophie's squeal of delight nearly deafened Ethan, a child-sized table set up with art supplies, and a plastic tub full of toy dinosaurs. "You got me dinosaurs!" Sophie turned to Lena with shining eyes. "These are the good kind. with the movable arms. I did some research, Lena said quietly. She looked at Ethan. I wanted her to feel welcome. Ethan couldn't speak. He stood in the doorway of this beautiful room that Lena had created for his daughter, a child she'd never met, a child she had no obligation to care about, and felt something crack open in his chest. Thank you, he managed. Lena just nodded. Sophie, why don't you explore a bit? Your dad and I need to talk about some grown-up things. But after that, we can order pizza. Do you like pizza? I love pizza. Then it's settled. Sophie needed no further encouragement. She dove into the toy bin with the single-minded focus of a paleontologist on a dig site. Ethan followed Lena back to the living room, his mind reeling. You didn't have to do all this, he said. Yes, I did. Lena poured them both coffee from that expensive machine. If we're going to live together, Sophie needs to feel safe, comfortable. This can't be a cage for her just because it's a business arrangement for us. Most people in your position wouldn't think like that. Most people in my position inherited their money and their moral flexibility. Lena handed him the coffee. I had to earn both. Sit. We have a lot to discuss. They sat. Lena pulled out a tablet and brought up a document, a timeline, color-coded and detailed. This is our schedule for the next 8 weeks, she explained. We'll have the legal marriage next Friday, small ceremony, just us and witnesses, purely procedural. The following weekend, we'll announce it to my family at a dinner party. We'll need a believable story about how we met, how long we've been dating, why we moved so quickly. What's the story? Ethan asked. We met 6 months ago when you were doing maintenance work in my office. I was stressed about a deal, you made me laugh. We started talking, kept running into each other, started dating quietly because we wanted to keep it private. The wedding is quick because we're both practical people who don't see the point in waiting. It was a good story. Simple, mostly true, impossible to disprove. What about your brother, Gavin? Lena's expression hardened. Gavin will try to prove it's a sham. He's already suspicious. He's had private investigators following me for the past month. That's actually one of the reasons I chose you. A maintenance worker with a young daughter drowning in debt? You're exactly the kind of person I'd never fake a relationship with. It's too messy, too complicated. Thanks, I think. It's a compliment. You're unpredictable. That makes you valuable. Lena scrolled through the timeline. We'll need to be seen together. Dinners, charity events, family functions. And we'll need to adjust our public dynamic. Learn each other's habits, stories, preferences. Couples know these things about each other. Ethan thought about Emma, about how he'd known she took her coffee with too much sugar and not enough cream, how she hummed off key when she was happy, how she always fell asleep with one foot outside the blankets. The idea of manufacturing that kind of intimacy with a stranger felt like a betrayal. But Emma was gone. And Sophie was in the next room, playing with dinosaurs in a beautiful bedroom that represented the kind of stability Ethan hadn't been able to give her since her mother died. Okay, he said. Where do we start? With the basics. Lena pulled up a new document, a questionnaire. Favorite color? Green. Yours? Blue. Favorite food? Thai. You? Italian. Morning person or night owl? Morning person, unfortunately. You're definitely a night owl. Lena raised an eyebrow. How do you know? You called me at 6 a.m. the first time we talked, but you sounded like you'd been up for hours, and right now it's 6:30 p.m., and you look more awake than you did at dawn yesterday. Classic night owl pattern. Observant. She made a note on her tablet. That's good. We'll need that. They went through the questionnaire. Childhood memories, pet peeves, dreams, fears. Some answers were easy. Some made Ethan's chest tighten, especially when Lena asked about Emma, and he had to decide how much truth to share. She was a teacher, he said finally. 3rd grade. She loved kids, not just Sophie, but all kids. She used to say that teaching was the only job that let you believe in the future every single day. The cancer, it was aggressive, ovarian. By the time they caught it, it had already spread. We had 18 months from diagnosis to... His voice cracked. 18 months, and then she was gone. Lena was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry," she said, and it didn't sound like a platitude. It sounded like she meant it. "What about you?" Ethan asked. "Ever been married? Close?" "No. I was engaged once, about 5 years ago. Corporate attorney, impeccable pedigree, all the right boxes checked. Then I found out he was feeding company information to a competitor. He claimed it was an accident. I claimed our relationship was over." Lena's smile was sharp. "Gavin tried to convince me to forgive him, said I was being too harsh. That should have been my first clue about where my brother's loyalties lay." "Your family sounds complicated." "That's a generous word for it." Lena set the tablet aside. "My father was brilliant and ruthless. My mother died when I was 8, car accident, drunk driver. Dad never really recovered. He poured everything into the company and expected Gavin and me to do the same. Gavin hated it. He wanted to be an artist, a musician, anything but a businessman. But Dad didn't accept anything less than total commitment. So Gavin resents the company. Gavin resents me. I'm everything Dad wanted, driven, strategic, willing to sacrifice. Gavin just wants to burn it all down and take the insurance money." A sound from the hallway made them both turn. Sophie stood there, holding a plastic triceratops in one hand and wearing an expression of deep concern. "Daddy, are you sad?" she asked. Ethan's heart squeezed. "No, sweetheart. Just talking about some serious stuff. Come here." Sophie climbed into his lap, still clutching her dinosaur. She looked at Lena with those big brown eyes and asked, "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" Ethan froze. They hadn't discussed this part, how to explain Lena to a 4-year-old who still sometimes asked when Mommy was coming home. But Lena didn't hesitate. She leaned forward, her voice gentle, and said, "I'm your dad's friend, and I'm hoping we can all be friends together. Would that be okay with you?" Sophie considered this with the gravity of someone deciding the fate of nations. Then she nodded and held out the triceratops. "Do you want to meet Terry? He's very nice, but sometimes he gets scared of the T-Rex." "I would love to meet Terry," Lena said, accepting the toy like it was a priceless artifact. And just like that, the tension broke. They ordered pizza, pepperoni for Sophie, margarita for Lena, everything for Ethan because he'd learned long ago that single dads didn't get to be picky. Sophie gave Lena a comprehensive lecture on the Mesozoic era while demonstrating complex dinosaur battles. Lena listened with what looked like genuine interest, asking questions that made Sophie light up with joy. Ethan watched them and felt something dangerous starting to take root in his chest. Hope. Later, after Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch, mid-sentence, about velociraptors, Ethan carried her to the bedroom that would soon be hers. She was getting too big for this. He wouldn't be able to carry her much longer. But for now, she still fit perfectly in his arms. He laid her on the new bed, pulled the soft blanket up to her chin, and whispered, "Sweet dreams, baby girl." "Daddy?" Her eyes fluttered open. "I like Lena. She's nice." "Yeah," Ethan said softly. "She is." "Is she going to stay?" The question hit him like a punch. "For a while, yeah." "Good." Sophie's eyes drifted shut. "I don't want you to be so tired anymore." Ethan stood there in the dark, his daughter's words echoing in his head, and wondered what the hell he'd gotten them into. When he came back to the living room, Lena was clearing the pizza boxes. She'd kicked off her shoes and rolled up her sleeves, and she looked almost domestic, a word Ethan would never have associated with the Ice Queen CEO he'd crashed into in that hallway. "She's asleep," he said. "She's lovely. You've done a remarkable job with her." "I've done a barely adequate job keeping us both afloat." "Same thing, sometimes." Lena washed her hands in the kitchen sink, her back to him. "Ethan, I need to be clear about something. This arrangement, it's business. I won't pretend it's anything else, but Sophie doesn't deserve to be collateral damage. So while we're doing this, while she's in this space, I promise I'll treat her with respect and care. Not because the contract says so, but because she's a child and she deserves better than what the world's already given her." Ethan crossed the room until he was standing next to her, both of them reflected in the dark window glass. Two people who'd become allies in the strangest way possible. "Thank you," he said, "for all of this. The room, the dinosaurs, the kindness. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." Lena turned to face him, and in the dim light of the kitchen, Her eyes looked less like ice and more like winter sky just before it snows. If we're going to lie to everyone else, we should at least be honest with each other. Deal? She held out her hand. Ethan took it, her skin cool and steady against his. Deal. They shook on it, a contract within a contract, and Ethan felt the weight of the future settle onto his shoulders. In 1 week, he'd be married to this woman. In 8 weeks, he'd have to convince her entire family that their love was real. In 1 year, he'd walk away with enough money to start over. All he had to do was not fall for the woman he was pretending to love. How hard could that be? The marriage license felt too light in Ethan's hand for something that was about to change his entire life. They stood in the King County Courthouse on a gray Friday morning, Sophie at daycare, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down like the low clouds outside. Lena wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly salary, her hair twisted up in some complicated style that made her neck look longer, more vulnerable. Ethan had borrowed a suit from his brother-in-law, navy blue, slightly too tight in the shoulders, and felt like an imposter in his own skin. The witnesses were Lena's attorney, Marcus Chen, a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a kind smile, and his paralegal Jennifer, who kept sneaking glances at Ethan like she was trying to solve a puzzle. They knew the truth, of course. They'd drafted the contract. But they played their roles perfectly, smiling and nodding as the officiant, a tired-looking woman named Judge Morrison, recited the standard vows. Do you, Lena Marie Harrington, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Lena's voice was steady, her hand cool in Ethan's. And do you, Ethan James Cole, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Ethan looked at Lena, at the woman who was about to become his wife, in the eyes of the law, if not in the eyes of God or love, or whatever force governed real marriages. Her expression was composed, professional, giving nothing away. But her thumb brushed against his palm, once, twice, and he realized she was nervous. I do, he said. Then, by the power vested in me by the state of Washington, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. They'd discussed this moment, practiced it even, in the clinical way you'd practice a handshake before a job interview. A brief kiss, nothing dramatic, just enough to sell the moment. But when Ethan leaned in and Lena's lips met his, something unexpected happened. It wasn't passion or fireworks or any of the things songs promised. It was just real, warm, human. The touch of two people acknowledging that they were in this together, whatever this turned out to be. When they pulled apart, Lena's eyes were wider than before, a small crease between her brows that suggested she'd felt it too. That flicker of something that wasn't supposed to be part of the deal. Marcus and Jennifer applauded. Judge Morrison smiled and handed them the marriage certificate. Just like that, it was done. Ethan Cole was married to a woman he barely knew, bound by law and contract to spend the next year pretending their connection was something it wasn't. Congratulations, Marcus said, shaking Ethan's hand with genuine warmth. Welcome to the family, so to speak. Thank you. Ethan looked at the certificate, at their names printed side by side. Feels surreal. Most good things do, Jennifer said, and there was something in her tone that made Ethan think she might actually believe in what they were doing. Consequences be damned. They signed the paperwork in a small office that smelled like old coffee and bureaucracy. Lena's signature was a swift slash of black ink, confident and final. Ethan's hand shook slightly as he wrote his name, thinking about Sophie, about Emma, about all the ways this could go wrong. Lunch? Lena asked as they stepped out into the drizzle that passed for sunshine in Seattle. I should get back to work. I'm already pushing my break time. Ethan, she said his name like it was a gentle command. You don't work maintenance anymore. I had HR process your transfer this morning. You're now Assistant Director of Operations, effective immediately, $55,000 a year, full benefits, office on the 20th floor. Ethan stopped walking. Rain misted against his face, cold and grounding. You what? We can't have my husband working maintenance. People would ask questions. This way, you have a legitimate reason to be in the building, to have access to executive floors, to attend company functions. Lena pulled out her phone. already moving to the next item on whatever mental checklist she maintained. The position is real. You'll have actual responsibilities. Marcus will brief you Monday morning. I don't know anything about operations management. You know how buildings work, how systems function, how to solve problems under pressure. That's 90% of operations. She glanced at him, her expression softening slightly. And you can't keep working 60-hour weeks in the basement while pretending to be my devoted husband. You'll collapse within a month. She was right. Ethan knew she was right. But the sudden shift from drowning to breathing, from invisible to visible, left him dizzy. Okay, he said. Lunch. They ate at a small Vietnamese place 2 blocks from the courthouse, tucked into a corner booth while the rain drummed against the windows. Lena ordered pho without looking at the menu, her movements efficient even in something as simple as adding sriracha and lime. Ethan watched her and tried to reconcile this woman, focused, driven, slightly remote, with the person who'd spent an hour last night on the floor of the penthouse, teaching Sophie how to make a baking soda volcano. We move your things this weekend, Lena said, pulling out her tablet. I've arranged for movers. You'll want to pack anything sentimental yourself, but they'll handle the furniture, boxes, logistics. I don't have much. Most of Emma's stuff. I had to. Ethan stopped, the words catching in his throat. You had to sell it, Lena finished quietly. To pay bills. Yeah, she nodded, making a note. Then the move should be straightforward. Sophie's room is ready. Your room is the master bedroom, opposite side of the penthouse from mine. Private bath, walk-in closet. I've cleared space for your things. Your room? Ethan repeated. We're not sharing a bedroom? No. The penthouse has 3 bedrooms. Sophie has one, you have the master, I have the third. My father designed it that way. He didn't believe in traditional family structures. Lena's smile was tight. One of the few areas where we agreed. The waitress brought their food. Steam rose from Lena's pho, and she closed her eyes briefly as she breathed it in. For a moment, she looked almost peaceful. What happens tomorrow? Ethan asked. At the family dinner? We tell them we're married, we weather the reaction, we stick to our story. Lena picked up her chopsticks with the precision of someone who'd eaten 1,000 meals alone. Gavin will be the problem. He'll push, probe, try to find inconsistencies. The rest of the family will probably just be confused. The rest of the family being? My Aunt Patricia, my father's sister. She's on the board, but mostly as a figurehead. My cousin Jeremy, Patricia's son, who works in our digital division. And Gavin, of course. My younger brother, 2 years my junior, and the person who'd most like to see me fail. Ethan thought about his own family, small, close, complicated in the way all families were, but never cruel. He really wants the company that badly. He wants what I have. That happens to be the company. Lena took a sip of her faux broth, her eyes distant. When we were kids, before Mom died, Gavin was the favorite, charming, artistic, everything Dad wanted to be but couldn't allow himself to become. Then Mom was gone, and Dad changed. He needed someone ruthless, someone strategic. That was me. Gavin never forgave me for becoming what Dad needed. That's not your fault. A fault doesn't matter, pain does. And Gavin's been in pain for 27 years. She set down her spoon. Don't mistake his suffering for innocence, though. He'd destroy the company and dance on its ashes if he thought it would hurt me. The bitterness in her voice was startling, like watching ice crack. Ethan reached across the table and touched her hand, a brief contact, barely a second, but enough to make her look up. Hey, he said. We're in this together now, for better or worse, right? That's what we just promised. Lena's laugh was soft and sad. Those vows weren't real, Ethan. The words were real. The commitment is real. Maybe the feelings aren't there yet, but the alliance is. He pulled his hand back, picked up his fork. So tomorrow, when we face your family, we face them together. And if Gavin wants a fight, he'll have to go through both of us. Something shifted in Lena's expression. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of trust. Thank you, she said quietly. They finished lunch in comfortable silence, and for the first time since this whole arrangement began, Ethan felt like maybe they could actually pull this off. The weekend passed in a blur of cardboard boxes and bubble wrap. Rachel helped with the packing, her expression cycling between supportive and deeply skeptical as she watched Ethan dismantle the life he'd built with Emma. "You're sure about this?" she asked for the 10th time, wrapping Sophie's dishes in newspaper. "No," Ethan said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." Sophie, for her part, was thrilled. She bounced between rooms, pointing out which stuffed animals needed to come with them immediately and which could ride in the moving truck. She talked about her new room, about Lena's promise to take her to the aquarium, about how high up they'd be living. "We'll be able to see the whole city, Daddy, even the Space Needle." Ethan watched his daughter's joy and felt the guilt ease slightly. Whatever else this was, it was giving Sophie something he hadn't been able to provide alone. Excitement about the future instead of fear. By Sunday evening, they were moved in. The master bedroom was enormous, bigger than the entire living room of their old apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Elliott Bay, the water dark and choppy under the sunset. Ethan's clothes looked ridiculous in the massive walk-in closet, his worn jeans and flannels hanging next to empty space where a real husband would have suits and ties and all the trappings of wealth. He found Lena in the kitchen, cooking something that smelled amazing. She'd changed into yoga pants and an old sweatshirt, her hair in a ponytail, and she looked younger like this. More approachable. "You cook?" Ethan asked. "I stress cook. Tomorrow's the dinner. Therefore, tonight I make lasagna." She gestured to the counter where ingredients were laid out with military precision. "You can help if you want. Or you can go spend time with Sophie. She's been asking when you'd be done unpacking." "I'll help." Ethan washed his hands at the sink. "What do you need?" They worked side by side, Lena directing him through chopping vegetables and layering pasta with the focused intensity she probably brought to board meetings. At some point, Sophie wandered in, drawn by the smell, and Lena lifted her onto a stool so she could help sprinkle cheese. "This is the most important job," Lena told her seriously. "The cheese is what holds everything together." "Like glue?" Sophie asked. "Exactly like glue. Delicious, melty glue." Sophie giggled, and the sound filled the kitchen with something that felt dangerously like family. They ate dinner together at the dining table, a massive thing that could seat 12 but felt intimate with just the three of them at one end. Sophie told them about her day, about the books she'd read and the pictures she'd drawn. Lena listened with genuine attention, asking questions that made Sophie light up. After dinner, after Sophie's bath and bedtime story, Ethan found Lena standing at the living room windows, a glass of wine in her hand, staring out at the city lights. "Thank you," he said, "for dinner, for being good with Sophie, for all of this." "Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow's the real test." Lena took a sip of wine. "My family is going to be, a lot. I've handled a lot before. Not like this." She turned to face him, and in the dim light, her eyes looked haunted. "They're going to say things about you, about us, about why someone like me would marry someone like you, Gavin especially. He'll go for the throat." "Someone like me," Ethan repeated. "You mean poor? Working class? A single dad with debt?" "I mean someone real. Someone who hasn't spent their entire life playing corporate chess." Lena's voice was soft. "You're going to remind them of everything they've insulated themselves against. Struggle, loss, actual consequences, and they'll hate you for it." "Will you?" The question came out before Ethan could stop it. "Hate me for it?" Lena looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she crossed the room and stood close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive. "No," she said quietly. "I don't think I could hate you if I tried. You're too decent. It's annoying, actually." Ethan laughed despite himself. "Sorry?" "Don't be. It's what I'm counting on." She touched his arm, a brief contact that sent warmth through the fabric of his shirt. "Tomorrow night, we present a united front. We tell them we fell in love, we got married quickly because we're both practical people who don't see the point in waiting. We answer their questions with just enough detail to be believable, but not so much that we get caught in contradictions. And when Gavin attacks, because he will attack, we don't flinch. We don't defend. We just exist. Together. Like it's the most natural thing in the world. And if I mess up, say the wrong thing, then we adapt. That's what marriage is, right? Constant adaptation. She smiled, and it was the saddest smile Ethan had ever seen. Even fake ones. She went to her room after that, leaving Ethan alone with the Seattle skyline and the growing realization that this arrangement was already more complicated than either of them had anticipated. The Harrington estate was in Medina, across Lake Washington from Seattle proper, a sprawling property that made Ethan's childhood home look like a garden shed. The driveway alone was longer than his old street. Manicured lawns, perfectly pruned trees, a fountain that probably cost more than a year of his old salary. This was old money, the kind that forgot it was money because it had always just been there. Lena drove them in her Tesla, one hand on the wheel, the other drumming against her thigh, and the only sign of nerves she'd shown all day. She'd dressed carefully, a burgundy dress that was elegant without being flashy, pearls that had been her mother's, heels that made her almost as tall as Ethan. Ethan wore the new suit Lena had insisted on buying him. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, Italian fabric that felt like wearing air. He looked the part of a successful executive, even if he felt like a kid playing dress-up. "Remember," Lena said as they pulled up to the house, "we met 6 months ago. We've been dating for 4. We fell in love gradually, then all at once. We got married last week because we didn't want to wait. You proposed." I said yes. Simple. Simple, Ethan echoed, his mouth dry. "And Ethan?" She reached over and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for doing this. I know it's not easy." Before he could respond, the front door opened and a woman in her 60s stepped out, tall, regal, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and an expression of polite curiosity. Lena's Aunt Patricia. "Showtime," Lena whispered. They got out of the car. Patricia's eyes moved from Lena to Ethan with the assessing gaze of someone used to evaluating people's worth in seconds. "Lena, darling," Patricia said, accepting Lena's kiss on the cheek. "And this must be your mystery guest. We've all been dying of curiosity since you said you had an announcement." "Aunt Patricia, this is Ethan Cole." Lena's hand found Ethan's, their fingers threading together with practiced ease. "My husband." Patricia's smile froze. "You're what?" "We got married last Friday," Lena said, her voice warm and steady. "I know it's sudden, but when you know, right, honey?" She looked at Ethan with such believable affection that for a moment he almost forgot it was an act. "Right," he managed, smiling. "When you meet the right person, everything else just falls into place." Patricia recovered quickly, her social training kicking in. "Well, congratulations. This is certainly a surprise. Come in, come in. Gavin and Jeremy are already here. This will be quite the announcement." They followed her into the house, all marble and mahogany, family portraits lining the hallway like a gallery of judgment. Ethan recognized Lena's father in several of them, a severe-looking man with sharp eyes and Lena's chin. There was one photo of Lena and Gavin as children, maybe 8 and 6, standing stiffly in front of a Christmas tree. Neither of them were smiling. The dining room was cavernous, dominated by a table that could seat 20. 2 men were already seated, one in his early 30s with sandy hair and a friendly face, who had to be Jeremy, and another man around Lena's age with dark hair and eyes that cut like glass. Gavin. "Everyone," Patricia announced, her voice carrying a note of forced cheer, "Lena has news." Gavin's gaze locked onto Ethan with the intensity of a predator spotting prey. "Well, well, big sister brought a date. How domestic." "Not a date, Gavin." Lena's voice was cool. "My husband. We got married last week." The silence that followed was deafening. Jeremy's mouth actually fell open. Patricia sank into her chair like her legs had given out. And Gavin started to laugh. "You're joking," he said. "This is some kind of stunt. A desperate attempt to satisfy Dad's ridiculous marriage clause." "It's not a stunt," Ethan said, finding his voice. "We're married, legally and legitimately." Gavin's eyes raked over him, taking in the suit, the haircut, the wedding ring that Lena had bought at a small jeweler in Capitol Hill. "And who exactly are you?" "Ethan Cole. I work at Harrington." "Worked maintenance," Gavin interrupted, pulling out his phone. "See, big sister, I do my homework. Ethan James Cole, age 33, widowed, 1 daughter, approximately $130,000 in debt. Recently promoted to assistant director of operations, in what I'm sure was a completely legitimate hiring process, and not at all a convenient cover story. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. My promotion was based on merit. Please. Gavin leaned back in his chair, his smile sharp. You've been working in our building for 3 years making poverty wages, and suddenly you're an executive? The same week you marry the CEO? Even you can't believe that's coincidence. Enough, Gavin. Lena's voice cracked like a whip. Ethan's qualifications are irrelevant to our marriage. We fell in love. We got married. That's all you need to know. Fell in love? Gavin repeated mockingly. In 6 months? Long enough to establish a believable timeline, but short enough that there's minimal evidence of your relationship? How convenient. Jeremy cleared his throat. Gavin, maybe we should just... Stay out of this, Jeremy. Gavin stood, circling the table toward Ethan like a shark. Tell me, Ethan, what attracted you to my sister? Her sparkling personality? Her warmth? Or was it the penthouse and the executive position and the convenient erasure of all that debt? Ethan felt Lena tense beside him. This was the moment, he realized. This was where they either sold the story or Gavin tore it apart. So Ethan did something that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. He laughed. You want to know what attracted me to Lena? He said, meeting Gavin's eyes. The first time I met her, I crashed into her in a maintenance hallway. She dropped an envelope. I picked it up. She tried to give me $200 as a thank you, and I said no. Do you know why? Gavin's smile faltered slightly. Enlighten me. Because she looked exhausted, worn down, like she was carrying the weight of the entire world and didn't trust anyone enough to help. And when I turned down that money, she looked at me like I was the first person in years who'd surprised her. Ethan took a step forward. Over the next 6 months, I kept running into her. Quick conversations at first, then longer ones. She'd come down to the maintenance floor with questions about building systems, and we'd end up talking about everything else. Her father, my wife, her company, my daughter. And yeah, she was beautiful and brilliant and completely out of my league. But what really got me was that she actually listened when I talked. She saw me as a person, not just a problem to solve or an employee to manage. He turned to Lena, and the look on her face, surprise and something softer, something almost vulnerable, made his next words easier to say. I fell in love with her because she's real, Gavin. Under all the armor and the power and the perfectly controlled image, she's just someone trying to do right by the people she cares about. And yeah, marrying her changed my life. It gave me stability, opportunity, a future. But you know what? I'd have fallen for her anyway, even without all this. He gestured at the opulent dining room. Because she's worth it. And if you can't see that, then I feel sorry for you. The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia stared at Ethan like he'd sprouted wings. Jeremy looked torn between impressed and uncomfortable. And Lena's eyes were bright, her hand gripping his so tightly he could feel her pulse racing. Gavin's expression had gone cold. That was quite a speech. It was the truth. We'll see about that. Gavin pulled out his phone again, typed something quickly. I've already hired investigators. If this marriage is a sham, I'll prove it. And when I do, Lena, you'll lose everything. The company, your position, your precious legacy, all of it. Then I guess you'll be disappointed, Lena said quietly. Because this marriage is real, Gavin. As real as anything else in this family has ever been. Patricia stood abruptly. I think we should all sit down and have a civilized dinner. Congratulations are in order, regardless of timeline concerns. Lena, Ethan, welcome. Let's eat. Dinner was a tense affair. Patricia made polite conversation about wedding plans and honeymoons. Jeremy tried to keep things light with questions about Ethan's new role. And Gavin sat in silence, his dark eyes tracking every interaction between Ethan and Lena like he was searching for cracks in their facade. Ethan played his part. He talked about meeting Lena, about their first real conversation, about realizing she was someone special. He touched her hand at appropriate moments, smiled at her jokes, deferred to her on company questions while still maintaining his own opinions. It felt like the longest performance of his life, except for the moments when it didn't feel like a performance at all, like when Lena mentioned Sophie and her whole face softened. Ethan's daughter is the most brilliant 4-year-old I've ever met. She's teaching me about dinosaurs. You have a daughter? Patricia asked, her expression warming slightly. Yeah, Sophie. She's with my sister tonight, but she's... Ethan pulled out his phone, showed them his lock screen, Sophie grinning at the camera, chocolate ice cream smeared on her face. She's my world. She's beautiful, Jeremy said genuinely. Does she like her new home? She loves it. Lena set up an entire room for her, complete with dinosaur toys and art supplies. Sophie thinks she won the lottery. Children adapt so quickly, Patricia said. It must be wonderful for her having a complete family again. The words hit Ethan like a blow. A complete family. As if Emma's absence was just a gap to be filled. As if Lena was a replacement instead of whatever she actually was. But Lena must have seen something in his expression because her hand found his under the table, squeezing gently. A reminder. They were in this together. Sophie's mother will always be part of our family, Lena said firmly. Emma shaped who Ethan is, and by extension, who Sophie is. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm just grateful to be included. Patricia nodded approvingly. Gavin's lip curled, and Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. Gratitude, maybe, or the beginning of something more dangerous. After dinner, while Patricia and Jeremy discussed business in the study and Gavin disappeared to make phone calls, Ethan and Lena stepped out onto the terrace. The night air was cold, and Seattle glowed across the water like a constellation. That was intense, Ethan said. That was Gavin on his best behavior. It'll get worse. Lena wrapped her arms around herself. Thank you for what you said in there, about me, about us. It was true, Ethan offered. She looked at him sharply. Was it? Parts of it. The part about you listening, about seeing me as a person. That was true. And the part about falling in love? Ethan's heart pounded. This was dangerous territory, straying from the script. The part about you being worth it? That was true too. Lena's breath caught. For a moment they stood there on the terrace, the space between them charged with something neither of them had planned for. We should go, Lena said finally, before Gavin corners us again. They said their goodbyes. Patricia warm, Jeremy friendly, Gavin conspicuously absent. On the drive home, Lena was quiet, her hands gripping the steering wheel. He's going to come after us hard, she said as they crossed the bridge back to Seattle. The investigators, the board, everything. We need to be airtight. Then we'll be airtight. Ethan, she glanced at him. What you said tonight, we can't blur the lines. This arrangement works because it's business. If we start believing our own story, I know, he said, even though his chest ached. I know. But when they got home and Sophie ran to greet them, throwing her arms around both of their legs and asking if they'd brought her any cake, Ethan caught the look on Lena's face, soft and unguarded and genuinely happy, and he wondered if it was already too late. The lines were already blurring. The question was whether that would save them or destroy them both. The weeks that followed the family dinner fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal, which terrified Ethan more than he wanted to admit. He'd wake up to find Lena already at the kitchen counter with her coffee and laptop, reviewing reports in the pre-dawn quiet. Sophie would stumble out in her pajamas, and Lena would close the laptop immediately, asking about dreams and breakfast preferences like she'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. They'd drop Sophie at her new school together, a private academy 3 blocks from Cascade Tower that cost more per year than Ethan used to make. And Lena would kiss Sophie's forehead before heading to the executive floor while Ethan went to his new office on 20. The office still felt surreal. Assistant Director of Operations meant coordinating building systems, managing vendor contracts, overseeing the maintenance team he used to be part of. His former supervisor, Frank, had been gracious about the promotion, but Ethan saw the questions in his eyes every time they crossed paths in the hallways. Questions Ethan couldn't answer without lying. Marcus Chen helped him navigate the role, patient and thorough in a way that suggested he knew exactly how out of his depth Ethan felt. They'd meet twice a week, going over reports and protocols, and Marcus never once made Ethan feel inadequate for not knowing corporate jargon or boardroom politics. You're doing well, Marcus said one afternoon 3 weeks into the arrangement. They were reviewing facilities budgets in Marcus's office, rain streaking the windows. Better than Lena expected, honestly. Ethan looked up from the spreadsheet. She said that? She said you're a quick study. From Lena, That's high praise. Marcus leaned back in his chair. How are you adjusting? To everything? The question felt loaded. Marcus knew the truth about the marriage, but he also seemed genuinely concerned about Ethan's well-being, which was disorienting. It's a lot, Ethan admitted. The job, the penthouse, the family dynamics. Sometimes I wake up and forget where I am. That's normal. You've had your entire life upended in less than a month. By choice. Choice made under duress is still duress. Marcus's expression was kind. Don't diminish what you're doing here, Ethan. You're helping someone who desperately needs it, and you're providing stability for your daughter. Those are good things. Even if they're built on a lie? Are they? Marcus asked. You're legally married. You're living together, building a life together, caring for each other in your own way. The feelings might be different than a traditional marriage, but the commitment is real. Sometimes the line between real and fake is thinner than we think. Ethan thought about that conversation later, sitting in his office as the sun set over Elliott Bay, the line between real and fake. He thought about how Lena had started leaving post-it notes on the coffee maker with reminders about Sophie's school events, how she'd learned to make scrambled eggs the way Sophie liked them, with cheese melted in, how she'd sit with Sophie every night for 30 minutes of reading time, her voice soft and patient as she helped sound out difficult words. He thought about the way his heart had started beating faster when Lena walked into a room, the way he noticed things, how she twisted her hair when she was thinking, how her laugh sounded different when it was genuine versus polite, how she'd press her fingers to her temples when a headache was coming on. These weren't things a fake husband noticed. These were things a real one did. His phone buzzed. Lena. Family holiday weekend at the estate. Thanksgiving. We need to go. All hands required. Gavin will be watching. Ethan's stomach dropped. A weekend. At the Harrington estate, with Gavin circling like a shark and an entire family scrutinizing their every interaction. He typed back. Does Sophie come? Lena. Yes. Patricia specifically requested her. Something about getting to know the newest Harrington. Ethan stared at that message. The newest Harrington. Sophie wasn't a Harrington. She was Sophie Cole, Emma's daughter, the product of a love that had been real and true and completely separate from this arrangement. But legally, technically, she was now part of the Harrington family. The thought made Ethan's throat tight. Another message from Lena. I know this is hard, but it's just a weekend. We can do this. Ethan typed, together. Lena, together. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were a masterclass in preparation. Lena drilled them on family history, on stories that would make their relationship seem established and genuine. They practiced casual touches, hand-holding, shoulder squeezes, the small intimacies that couples developed over time. It felt like rehearsing for a play where the audience was hostile and the stakes were everything. Sophie, oblivious to the undercurrents, was thrilled about the weekend. A big house with a big yard? And Aunt Patricia said there might be horses? Probably, Lena said, helping Sophie pack her small suitcase. The estate has stables. Do you like horses? I love horses. Well, I've never met one, but I love them in books. Then we'll make sure you meet some this weekend. Lena folded Sophie's favorite dinosaur pajamas with careful precision. And Sophie? This weekend, there are going to be a lot of new people. Some of them might ask you questions about me, about our family. You can always say you don't want to talk about it, okay? You don't owe anyone answers. Sophie looked up at her with those serious brown eyes. Are the people mean? Some of them are complicated, but your dad and I will be right there. You're safe. Sophie considered this, then nodded. Okay. Can I bring Terry? She held up her beloved Triceratops. Terry is essential, Lena said gravely. How else will you explain Mesozoic herbivore defense strategies? Sophie giggled, and Ethan watched from the doorway, his chest aching. This was the Lena that the world didn't get to see. Warm, patient, completely present. This was the Lena he was falling for, which was the worst possible thing that could happen. They drove to the estate Friday afternoon, Seattle traffic thick with holiday travelers. Sophie chattered from the back seat about Thanksgiving and turkeys, and whether dinosaurs would have celebrated if they'd had the chance. Lena answered every question with genuine thought, and Ethan found himself studying her profile, the clean line of her jaw. the way afternoon light caught in her hair. "You're staring," Lena said quietly, her eyes still on the road. "Sorry. Don't be sorry. Just be careful. This weekend we need to sell it, but we also need to remember what this is." What this is? A business arrangement, a contractual marriage, a carefully constructed lie. Except it didn't feel like a lie anymore, and that was the problem. The estate looked different in late November, the trees bare, the lawn frost-touched, the whole property feeling more exposed. Cars lined the circular driveway, Patricia's Mercedes, Jeremy's Audi, and a sleek black Range Rover that had to be Gavin's. "Deep breath," Lena said, more to herself than to Ethan. "We've got this." Patricia greeted them at the door, her smile warm and genuine. "There you are! And precious Sophie, come in, it's freezing out there." The house smelled like cinnamon and roasting turkey, holiday scents that brought a sharp pang of memory. Last Thanksgiving, it had been just Ethan and Sophie in their tiny apartment, eating grocery store rotisserie chicken because Ethan couldn't afford a turkey. Emma had been gone 6 months, and the grief had been so fresh that Ethan had barely made it through the day. This year, he was standing in a mansion, playing the role of loving husband to a woman he barely knew, pretending their family was something it wasn't. "Sophie!" Jeremy appeared from the living room, his smile genuine. "I've been dying to meet you. Your dad told me you're an expert on dinosaurs." "I know a lot about them," Sophie said shyly. "Then you need to meet my nephew, Tyler. He's 6 and completely obsessed with paleontology. He's in the den." Sophie looked at Ethan for permission. He nodded, and she ran off with Jeremy, leaving Ethan and Lena alone with Patricia. "She's delightful," Patricia said. "Absolutely delightful. Ethan, you should be very proud." "I am. Every day." "Lena, dear, Gavin's already here. He's in the study with some associates. Business, apparently, though I can't imagine what's so urgent it couldn't wait until Monday." Patricia's expression suggested she knew exactly what Gavin was doing. "Why don't you two get settled? You're in the East Wing, 2nd floor. Same room as always, Lena." Lena's hand tightened on Ethan's. "Thank you, Aunt Patricia." They climbed the grand staircase, their footsteps echoing on marble. The East Wing was quieter, more private. Lena opened a door at the end of the hall, and they stepped into a bedroom that was bigger than Ethan's entire old apartment. One bed. Lena saw his expression and sighed. "I should have anticipated this. Patricia knows this is my usual room when I stay over. I didn't think about the implications of—" "It's fine," Ethan said, though his pulse was racing. "We're married. Married couples share beds. It would be weird if we didn't." "Ethan, we can make it work. You take one side, I'll take the other. It's a king-sized bed. We could fit an entire football team in there." Lena almost smiled. "That's not how football teams work." "You know what I mean." She set her bag down, looking at the bed like it was a tactical problem to solve. "Okay, we'll make it work. But Ethan, we need to talk about tonight. Gavin's going to push. He'll try to separate us, ask Sophie questions, look for inconsistencies. We need to be united." "What kind of questions would he ask Sophie?" "How long she's known me, whether she likes me, if she's noticed anything strange about our relationship." Lena's jaw tightened. "He's ruthless, but he's not cruel to children. He won't bully her. But he'll manipulate her if he can." Anger flared in Ethan's chest. "If he upsets Sophie, I know, we'll protect her. That's priority 1. Lena crossed to the window, looking out at the estate grounds. "Do you see that building past the stables? The one with the cupola?" Ethan joined her. "Yeah. That's where Gavin and I used to hide when we were kids, before Mom died, before everything changed. We'd go there and play pretend. I was always the knight. He was always the artist who needed rescuing. Funny how roles reverse." Her voice was soft, edged with old pain. "He was my best friend once. It's easy to forget that when he's trying to destroy me." Ethan put his hand on her shoulder, a gentle weight. "People change. Grief changes them. That doesn't mean you're responsible for who he became. Doesn't it? I'm the one who thrived when Dad got ruthless. I'm the one who became everything Gavin hated. You became what you needed to be to survive. That's not a crime." Lena turned to face him, and they were close enough that Ethan could see the gold flecks in her blue eyes, could feel the warmth of her breath. How do you do that? Do what? Make me feel less alone. The words hung between them, honest and raw. Ethan's heart pounded. He knew what would happen if he closed the distance, if he kissed her like he wanted to. It would change everything. It would make this real in a way that would hurt when it ended. But Lena was looking at him like he was the answer to a question she'd been asking her whole life, and Ethan had never been good at denying people who needed him. He was saved, or damned, by a knock on the door. "Lena? Ethan?" Patricia's voice. "Dinner's ready when you are." They stepped apart like guilty teenagers. Lena smoothed her dress, her mask sliding back into place. "We should go down." Dinner was an elaborate affair, turkey and stuffing and enough side dishes to feed an army. Sophie sat between Ethan and Jeremy, delighted by Tyler, Jeremy's nephew, who was indeed obsessed with fossils. They talked in the shorthand of children who'd found a kindred spirit, and watching Sophie's joy was the only thing keeping Ethan grounded. Gavin sat across from them, his dark eyes cataloging every interaction. He'd brought a date, a woman named Vanessa who worked in finance and seemed bored by the entire proceeding. But Gavin's attention was laser-focused on Ethan and Lena. "So Ethan," Gavin said during a lull in conversation, "tell us about your late wife. Emma, wasn't it?" The table went silent. Patricia's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Jeremy looked uncomfortable, and Lena's hand found Ethan's under the table, squeezing hard. "What about her?" Ethan asked, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm just curious. How does someone go from being married to a school teacher to being married to a CEO? Those seem like very different worlds." "They are. But grief doesn't follow logic." Ethan met Gavin's eyes. "Emma was my first love, my best friend. Losing her nearly destroyed me. Lena..." He looked at her, and the words that came out surprised him with their truth. "Lena reminded me that I was still alive, that Sophie and I deserved more than just surviving. She didn't replace Emma. She gave me permission to have a future." Gavin's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or grudging respect. "That's very poetic. Did you rehearse it?" "Gavin," Patricia warned. "I'm just asking questions, Aunt Patricia, trying to understand my new brother-in-law." Gavin turned to Sophie, his smile sharp. "Sophie, sweetheart, do you like living with Lena?" Sophie looked up from her mashed potatoes. "She's teaching me to cook. We made cupcakes last week." "That's nice. Does it feel strange having a new person in your house?" "Gavin, that's enough," Lena said, her voice ice. "I'm just making conversation." "You're interrogating a 4-year-old. Lena stood, her napkin dropping to the table. "Sophie, honey, would you like to see the horses before it gets dark? I think they'd love to meet Terry." Sophie's face lit up. "Really? Really? Come on." They escaped, Lena taking Sophie's hand and leading her toward the back door. Ethan started to follow, but Gavin's voice stopped him. "Running away, Ethan? Or just following orders?" Ethan turned slowly. The dining room felt smaller suddenly, the air thick with tension. "I'm going with my family. You should try it sometime. Putting family first instead of whatever vendetta you're nursing." "Vendetta?" Gavin laughed. "You think this is personal? Isn't it? It's business. My sister is trying to steal my birthright using a fake marriage and a convenient widower. I'm simply ensuring the truth comes to light." "The truth," Ethan repeated. "You want the truth, Gavin? Here it is. Lena cares more about your father's company in one day than you have in your entire life. She's built something real, something that matters, and you want to tear it down because you can't stand that she's better at this than you'll ever be." Gavin's eyes went cold. "You don't know anything about our family." "I know enough. I know Lena lies awake at night worrying about employees, about contracts, about keeping the company her father built from being dismantled. I know she works herself to exhaustion because she actually cares. What do you care about, Gavin? Really?" "You're very defensive for someone in a business arrangement." The words hit like a slap. Ethan's blood went cold. "What did you say? Come on, Ethan. You think I don't have investigators? I know about the debt. I know about the promotion. I know about the suspiciously convenient timeline." Gavin leaned forward. "What I don't know yet is how you did it. What contract binds you? What loophole did Marcus find? But I will find out, and when I do, this whole house of cards collapses." "You're wrong." Am I? Then prove it. Tomorrow night there's a family tradition. Everyone stays up late, plays games, drinks too much wine. Couples end up sharing rooms, sharing secrets. Let's see if you and Lena can maintain your fiction when the pressure's really on. Ethan wanted to punch him, wanted to wipe that smug expression off Gavin's face and make him understand what he was trying to destroy. But violence wouldn't help. It would only prove Gavin right, that Ethan was desperate, uncontrolled, wrong for Lena. So instead, Ethan smiled. See you tomorrow night, Gavin. Bring your A-game. You'll need it. He walked out, his hands shaking, and found Lena and Sophie at the stables. Sophie was petting a chestnut mare while Lena held her steady, talking quietly about how to approach horses. The scene was so domestic, so perfectly normal, that Ethan felt something break in his chest. "Daddy!" Sophie waved. "Her name is Cinnamon. Isn't she beautiful?" "Gorgeous," Ethan managed. Lena looked at him, reading his expression in that uncanny way she had. What happened? Gavin knows, or suspects. He's pushing for proof. "Tomorrow night," Lena said quietly. "The tradition. I should have warned you." "What tradition?" "Family game night. It gets intense. People drink, barriers come down." Gavin's right. It's when the truth comes out. Her hand tightened on the stable door. "We need to be perfect, Ethan. One slip and he'll have everything he needs." That night, lying in the enormous bed with Lena on the far side, Ethan stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about the warmth of her presence 3 feet away. They changed in the bathroom separately, maintained scrupulous distance, built a wall of pillows down the center of the mattress like teenagers. "Ethan?" Lena's voice was soft in the darkness. "Yeah? Thank you. For what you said at dinner. About Emma, about me. It was true. It was true." Silence. Then, "What are we doing?" "Getting through the weekend." "No, I mean, what are we doing? This started as business, but somewhere along the way—" She trailed off. Ethan's heart raced. Somewhere along the way it got complicated. Complicated doesn't begin to cover it. He heard her shift, the rustle of sheets. "I care about Sophie, really care about her, and you—" Another pause. "This was supposed to be simple." "Nothing about you is simple, Lena." A soft laugh. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." More silence. Ethan felt the weight of all the things they weren't saying, hanging in the air like smoke. He wanted to cross the distance between them, wanted to pull her close and stop pretending this was anything other than what it was becoming. But before he could move, he heard her breathing slow, evening out into sleep. And he lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe, and knew they were in trouble. Morning came too soon. Ethan woke to find Lena already up, standing at the window in sweatpants and a t-shirt, coffee in hand. Her hair was loose, and the early light made her look softer, younger. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Kept thinking about tonight, about what Gavin might do." She turned to face him. "We need a plan." They strategized over breakfast while Sophie was still asleep. The plan was simple. Stay together, maintain physical contact, laugh at the right moments, and above all, don't let Gavin separate them or put them in positions where they'd have to answer questions alone. "And if he does?" Ethan asked. "We fall back on the truth as much as possible. We met, we connected, we fell in love. The timeline is real, the feelings are real. Everything else is detail." "Are the feelings real?" Lena looked at him, and in her eyes Ethan saw the same confusion he felt. "I don't know anymore." "Are they?" Before Ethan could answer, Sophie appeared in the doorway, dragging Terry and looking sleepy. "Is it Thanksgiving yet?" "Almost, sweetheart. Come here." Sophie climbed into Ethan's lap, and Lena automatically reached over to smooth her hair. The gesture so natural, it took Ethan's breath away. This was what they looked like. A family. Broken and rebuilt and held together by choice rather than blood, but a family nonetheless. The day passed in a blur of food preparation and family small talk. Sophie helped Patricia in the kitchen, covered in flour and giggling. Jeremy and Tyler built a massive fort in the living room, and Gavin circled the edges, watching, waiting. Dinner was elaborate. Patricia had outdone herself. Turkey and ham and dishes from family recipes that went back generations. They ate until they couldn't move. And then Patricia brought out pies, pumpkin and apple and pecan. Sophie's eyes went wide. "Can I have all three?" she whispered to Ethan. "One piece, sweetheart." "But Daddy—" "She can have all three," Patricia said, already cutting generous slices. "It's Thanksgiving. Calories don't count." After dinner, after the dishes were cleared and the dining room transformed, Gavin brought out games, cards, board games, trivia, and wine. Lots of wine. Of Harrington family tradition, Jeremy explained to Ethan. "We play until someone cries or falls asleep. Usually both." Sophie was taken up to bed by one of Patricia's staff, a kind woman who promised stories and hot chocolate. Ethan kissed his daughter goodnight and watched her go, feeling like he was sending her into battle without armor. "She'll be fine," Lena murmured. "Maria's been with the family for 20 years. She practically raised Gavin and me." The games began innocuously enough. Trivial Pursuit, which Jeremy dominated, then Pictionary, which dissolved into arguments about whether Gavin's drawing of a horse looked more like a deformed llama. Wine flowed freely. Barriers came down, and Gavin's eyes grew sharper, more focused. "Let's play a different game," he suggested around 11. "Truth or dare?" "We're not teenagers," Lena said. "No, we're family, and family should know each other." "Truth or dare, big sister?" Lena's jaw tightened. "Truth. When did you first realize you were in love with Ethan?" "The exact moment." The room went silent. Patricia and Jeremy leaned forward, genuinely curious. Vanessa looked bored, and Gavin smiled like a cat with a mouse. Lena didn't hesitate. "The first time he said no to me, when I tried to give him money for returning that envelope. Everyone in my life wants something from me. Money, power, connections. Ethan wanted nothing. It was startling. I couldn't stop thinking about it. About him." Gavin's smile faltered. "That's not love, that's curiosity." "That's how it starts," Lena said quietly. "Curiosity becomes admiration. Admiration becomes affection. And affection becomes love so gradually you don't notice until you're already gone." She looked at Ethan as she said it, and the heat in her gaze made his mouth go dry. "Ethan's turn," Gavin said. "Truth or dare?" "Truth." "Do you love my sister? Really, truly love her? Or is this just the best deal you've ever made?" Ethan felt everyone's eyes on him. This was the moment, he realized. The moment where he either lied convincingly or told a truth that would change everything. He thought about Lena reading to Sophie at night, about her post-it notes and her terrible jokes, and the way she'd cried watching a sad movie 2 nights ago, trying to hide it until Ethan had simply handed her tissues without comment. He thought about waking up next to her this morning, about the way his heart had stuttered at the sight of her in the window light. "Yes," he said, and realized with stunning clarity that it was true. "I love her. Not because of what she can give me or what this arrangement provides. I love her because she's brilliant and stubborn, and she cares so much it scares her. I love her because she learned to make Sophie's favorite breakfast, even though she's never cooked for anyone in her life. I love her because when she laughs, really laughs, not that polite CEO laugh, it sounds like music. And I love her because despite everything in her life that's told her not to trust people, she trusted me." The silence was absolute. Lena's eyes were wide, shining with something that might have been tears. Gavin's expression had gone from smug to shocked, and Patricia was smiling like she'd just witnessed something beautiful. "Well," Jeremy said finally, "I think that answers that question." But Gavin wasn't done. "Lena's turn. Truth or dare?" "Dare," Lena said, her voice unsteady. "I dare you to kiss your husband. And I mean really kiss him, not that chaste peck at the courthouse. Show us this love is real." It was a trap, a public test. But Lena didn't hesitate. She stood, crossed to where Ethan sat, and pulled him to his feet. Her hands came up to frame his face, and she looked at him with something raw and honest in her eyes. "Is this okay?" she whispered, too quiet for anyone else to hear. "Yeah," Ethan breathed. And then she kissed him. It wasn't performative. It wasn't careful. It was desperate and real and tasted like wine and truth. Ethan's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and he forgot about Gavin and the game and the fact that this was supposed to be fake. All he knew was Lena in his arms, kissing him like she'd been wanting to for weeks, Like maybe this had been inevitable from the moment they crashed into each other in that maintenance hallway. When they finally pulled apart, Lena's lips were swollen, her breathing ragged. Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. Satisfied? Lena asked Gavin, not looking away from Ethan. Gavin's expression was unreadable. For now. The game dissolved after that. Patricia declared it late and shooed everyone to bed. Ethan and Lena climbed the stairs in silence, the kiss hanging between them like a promise or a threat. When they reached their room, Lena closed the door and leaned against it. Ethan, don't. He crossed to her. Don't tell me that was just for show. Don't tell me you didn't mean it. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't mean it. This arrangement has an end date. In less than a year, we get divorced and you walk away. If I let myself feel this, you already feel it, so do I. This wasn't the deal. I know. Ethan rested his forehead against hers. But here we are anyway. They stood there, breathing the same air, balanced on the edge of something they couldn't take back. And then Lena kissed him again, and all the walls they'd built came crashing down. They woke tangled together, the wall of pillows long since abandoned. Ethan's arm was around Lena's waist, her head tucked under his chin, their legs intertwined like they'd been sleeping this way for years instead of hours. Dawn light filtered through the curtains, painting everything in shades of gold and rose, and for a moment, just a moment, Ethan let himself pretend this was real, that they were a normal couple waking up on the day after Thanksgiving, that the woman in his arms loved him without contracts or clauses, that the future stretched out uncomplicated and full of promise. Then Lena stirred and reality crashed back. She pulled away slowly, carefully, like she was trying not to wake him even though they both knew he was already awake. She sat on the edge of the bed, her back to him, and Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. Lena, we need to talk about last night. Her voice was steady, controlled, the CEO mask sliding back into place. What happened can't happen again. Ethan sat up, the sheets pooling around his waist. Why not? Because it complicates everything. This arrangement has rules, boundaries. Last night we crossed every single one. Maybe the rules were wrong. She turned to face him, and her eyes were haunted. The rules are what keep this from becoming a disaster. You have a daughter, Ethan. What happens when this ends and Sophie's attached to me? When she thinks we're a real family, and then we're not anymore? We can't be selfish about this. The words hit like ice water. Sophie, of course, this wasn't just about them. It had never been just about them. Sophie was already calling Lena's name when she got home from school, already asking if Lena would be at her winter concert, already drawing pictures of the three of them together. You're right, Ethan said quietly. We need to think about Sophie. So we go back to the original plan. Professional distance, public affection, private boundaries. We can be friends, partners, co-parents even, but we can't be what last night suggested we could be. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that it was already too late, that they'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But Lena's expression was so carefully neutral, so determinedly closed off, that he knew pushing would only make her retreat further. Okay, he said, professional distance. Something flickered in her eyes. Relief or disappointment, he couldn't tell. Thank you. She went to shower, and Ethan lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling and wondering how you were supposed to unfall for someone when every molecule in your body was pulling you toward them. The ride back to Seattle was quiet. Sophie chattered from the back seat about the horses and the games with Tyler and the 17 different kinds of pie she'd apparently consumed. Lena smiled and responded at all the right moments, but there was a distance in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Ethan drove and tried not to think about how her hand had felt in his, how she'd kissed him, like she was drowning and he was air. The week that followed was a study in careful avoidance. They maintained their public routines, dropping Sophie at school together, attending a charity gala where they smiled and held hands and played their roles perfectly. But at home, Lena worked late in her office, emerging only after Sophie was asleep. They moved around the penthouse like ghosts, polite and distant and aching. Marcus noticed. He didn't say anything directly, but during their Wednesday meeting, he set down his pen and looked at Ethan with concern. Everything all right? You seem distracted. Just adjusting still. It's a lot. The job or the marriage? Ethan's laugh was bitter. Both, neither. I don't know anymore. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can I give you some advice? Not as your colleague, but as someone who's been watching Lena for years? Please. She's terrified of failing, of being vulnerable, of needing anyone. Her father taught her that love was weakness, that relationships were just another form of business transaction. And then you came along, honest and real and completely unpredictable. You scare her, Ethan, in the best possible way. She ended it. Whatever it was, she ended it. Did she? Or did she panic and retreat to familiar ground?" Marcus leaned forward. "Lena's going to push you away. It's what she does when she cares too much. The question is whether you're willing to wait for her to realize she's wrong." Ethan thought about that conversation later, sitting in his office as evening darkened the windows. Was he willing to wait? To keep playing this role while his heart broke a little more each day? To watch Lena armor herself against the very feelings that made this bearable? His phone buzzed. "Rachel. How's married life? You've been radio silent for 2 weeks." Ethan stared at the message, then called her. She answered on the second ring. "Finally, I was starting to think you'd been kidnapped by rich people and forced to drink champagne against your will. Rachel, wait, that's actually what happened, isn't it? Except you volunteered. How's it going? How's Sophie?" "Sophie's great. She loves the new school, loves Lena, loves the penthouse. She's thriving. And you?" Ethan closed his eyes. "I'm in trouble, Rach." "What kind of trouble?" "The falling in love with my fake wife kind." Silence. Then, "Oh, Ethan." I know it's stupid and reckless and completely against the rules. But somewhere between the dinosaur conversations and the family dinners and watching her with Sophie, I fell. And she felt it too, I know she did. But now she's shutting down, retreating, and I don't know how to fix it." "Can I ask you something? Why do you want to fix it?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, this arrangement has an end date. In less than a year, you walk away with enough money to start over. Maybe Lena pulling back is the smart play. Maybe you should let her." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because when Lena smiled at Sophie, her whole face transformed. Because she left post-it notes with terrible jokes on his bathroom mirror. Because she'd learned to make coffee the way he liked it and always asked about his day and had started referring to them as we without realizing it. Because loving her felt like breathing, and stopping would kill something vital in him. Because she's worth fighting for, Ethan said finally. Even if the fight is just waiting for her to realize she wants this too. Rachel sighed. "You're either the bravest person I know or the dumbest. Maybe both." "Probably both. Just promise me you'll protect Sophie. Whatever happens between you and Lena, don't let our girl get hurt." "That's priority 1. Always." After they hung up, Ethan sat in the growing dark and made a decision. He couldn't force Lena to feel anything, couldn't demand she acknowledge what was between them. But he could show her every day that he wasn't going anywhere, that she could push and retreat and armor herself, and he'd still be there when she was ready. The next 2 weeks tested that resolve. Gavin escalated his campaign, filing preliminary challenges to Lena's position as CEO, citing the suspicious timing of her marriage and demanding a board review. News leaked to the business press, and suddenly their private arrangement was public speculation. Reporters camped outside Cascade Tower. Social media dissected every photo of them together, looking for proof of fraud. Lena handled it with characteristic steel, releasing a statement affirming the legitimacy of their marriage and challenging Gavin to bring evidence rather than innuendo. But Ethan saw the toll it took. The tension in her jaw, the shadows under her eyes, the way she'd stand at the windows late at night, staring at the city like it held answers. The board scheduled an emergency meeting for December 15th, 3 weeks away. They'd review the marriage, investigate the circumstances, and determine whether Lena's position was secure. Marcus warned them it would be ugly, that Gavin had been building his case for weeks, that they needed to be prepared for anything. "He has the contract, doesn't he?" Lena asked during a late-night strategy session in her office. It was past midnight, Sophie long asleep, and they were surrounded by legal documents and coffee cups. Marcus hesitated. We believe so. He's filed discovery requests that suggest he knows about the financial arrangements. How? Ethan demanded. The contract was confidential. You said, I know what I said, but Gavin has resources. He could have hacked our servers, bribed someone, gotten a warrant under false pretenses. We're investigating, but right now we have to assume he has everything. Lena's face went pale. Then it's over. The board sees the contract, they see the debt payoff, the salary increase, the timing. They'll vote me out. Not necessarily. Marcus pulled out another file. While investigating Gavin's activities, we found some interesting irregularities. Unauthorized access to company emails, including yours. Diverted funds from operational budgets. Communication with competitors that could constitute corporate espionage. And, he paused, an ongoing relationship with a board member's wife, Caroline Henderson. Lena's eyes widened.
James Henderson's wife? Gavin's having an affair with a board member's wife? Has been for 6 months. We have emails, hotel receipts, photographs. It's a clear violation of company ethics policy and arguably grounds for immediate termination. That's why he's pushing so hard, Ethan said slowly. He knows if this comes out, he's done. So he's trying to take you down first, make your revelation of his behavior look like retaliation. Exactly. Marcus looked at Lena. We can use this. Present it to the board before Gavin presents your contract. Shift the narrative from your personal life to his professional misconduct. That's dirty, Lena said. That's survival, Marcus countered. Gavin didn't get this information cleanly. He violated your privacy, possibly broke multiple laws. You're not obligated to protect him. Lena stood, pacing to the windows. Ethan watched her think, watched her weigh options with that brilliant, strategic mind. Finally, she turned back. No, we don't use it unless we have to. Gavin goes first, he presents his evidence, and then we respond with truth. Truth? Marcus looked skeptical. Lena, the truth is that you entered a contractual marriage to satisfy your father's will. The board won't care about your reasons or your feelings. They'll see fraud. Then let them see it. Let them see all of it. Lena's voice was steady. We present the contract, yes, but we also present context. My father's sexist will clause. Gavin's years of undermining me. The fact that the marriage, while unconventional in origin, has become real. That Ethan and I, she glanced at him, that we're a family now, complicated and messy and not what we planned, but real. That's risky, Marcus warned. I know, but I'm tired of hiding, tired of playing games. If the board votes me out because I chose an unconventional solution to an impossible problem, then maybe I don't want to lead a company that values procedure over people. Ethan's heart was pounding. He stood, crossed to where Lena stood by the windows. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm sure about you, about us, about the fact that what started as business has become something I'm not willing to lie about anymore. She looked up at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I know I pushed you away. I know I said we needed distance, but I was scared, Ethan. Of failing you, of failing Sophie, of proving my father right that love and business don't mix. But here's the truth. I love you. I love our strange, complicated, completely unconventional family, and I'm not going to stand in front of a board and pretend otherwise. The words hung in the air between them, impossibly brave and terrifying. Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. I love you too, he said. I think I started falling that day in the hallway, and I haven't stopped since. Even though I'm difficult and controlling and emotionally constipated, especially because of that. She laughed through her tears. And then she was kissing him. And Marcus was diplomatically gathering his papers and leaving them alone in the office with the city lights spread below and the future uncertain and perfect. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Marcus built their case, documenting the legitimacy of their relationship through photos, witness statements, evidence of cohabitation, and shared finances. Jennifer compiled a timeline showing how Ethan's promotion was justified by performance reviews and building improvement metrics that predated the marriage. And Lena rehearsed her statement, the words she'd say when the board demanded answers. At home, things shifted. Lena stopped retreating to her office. They had dinner together every night,
the three of them talking about school and work, and Sophie's grand plans to become a paleontologist astronaut. They watched movies curled up on the couch, Sophie between them until she fell asleep, and Ethan carried her to bed. And at night, Ethan would find Lena in the living room, and they'd talk for hours about everything and nothing, building the foundation of something real. "What happens if we lose?" Lena asked one night, a week before the board meeting. They were on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "We don't lose. We have truth on our side. Truth doesn't always win in boardrooms. Then we build something new. You're brilliant, Lena. You could start another company, consult, do anything you want. The Harrington name opens doors. And you'd walk away from your job, your stability?" Ethan kissed the top of her head. "I'd walk away from anything that didn't include you and Sophie. You're my stability now." She tilted her face up to look at him. "When did you get so romantic?" "When I married a woman who pretends she doesn't have feelings but cries at insurance commercials. That dog was very cute. It was a cartoon dog." "Your point?" He kissed her, soft and sweet, and felt her smile against his lips. This was what they'd built, humor and honesty, and a love that had snuck up on them when they weren't looking. Whatever the board decided, they had this. They had each other. December 15th dawned cold and clear. Ethan dropped Sophie at school, holding her extra long when she hugged him goodbye. "Big meeting today, Daddy?" "Yeah, baby girl, really big." "Will Lena be there?" "She will." "Then you'll be fine. Lena's smart. She can fix anything." Sophie kissed his cheek. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, sweetheart." The boardroom was on the 32nd floor, all glass and steel and intimidation. 12 board members sat around the massive table, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. James Henderson looked particularly grim, though whether that was because of the meeting or because he somehow knew about his wife and Gavin, Ethan couldn't tell. Gavin sat at one end of the table, his lawyer beside him, looking confident and dangerous. Lena sat opposite him, Marcus and Jennifer flanking her, with Ethan next to Lena. He reached under the table and took her hand. She squeezed back hard. The board chair, a silver-haired woman named Margaret Chen, called the meeting to order. "We're here to address concerns raised by Gavin Harrington regarding his sister's recent marriage and its potential impact on company governance. Gavin, you have the floor." Gavin stood, all polished confidence. "Thank you, Margaret. As you all know, our father's will contains a clause requiring the CEO to be married before their 36th birthday to maintain majority control. My sister turned 36 next month, and conveniently, she married someone she claims to have been dating for 4 months. Someone who, up until a month ago, worked maintenance in this very building." He pulled out documents, sliding them across the table. "These are financial records showing that Ethan Cole was approximately $130,000 in debt when he married my sister. These are employment records showing his sudden promotion from maintenance worker to assistant director of operations the same week they married. And this," he pulled out the contract. "This is a legal agreement between Lena and Ethan, outlining the terms of their marriage. 1-year term, financial compensation upon completion, cohabitation requirements. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a marriage. It's a business transaction designed to defraud this board and violate the spirit of our father's will." The room erupted. Board members grabbed for the contract, their voices rising in shock and anger. Ethan felt Lena tense beside him, felt her preparing to defend, to explain. But before she could speak, Ethan stood. "You're right," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The marriage started as a business transaction. Lena needed a husband to satisfy an archaic, sexist will clause that essentially told her she wasn't capable of running this company without a man beside her. I needed a way out of debt that was literally killing me, that was preventing me from giving my daughter the life she deserved after losing her mother. So yes, we made a deal, a contract. We agreed to marry for 1 year, to live together, to present a united front, and in exchange, I'd receive compensation and Lena would keep control of the company she spent her entire life building." The board members were staring at him now, some in shock, some in disgust. James Henderson looked like he was about to have a stroke. "But here's what that contract didn't account for," Ethan continued. "It didn't account for the fact that Lena is brilliant and funny and fiercely protective of the people she loves. It didn't account for the way she'd learned to make my daughter's favorite breakfast, or how she'd leave ridiculous notes on the bathroom mirror to make me smile, or how she'd work herself to exhaustion because she actually cares about every employee in this building. The contract said we'd live together. It didn't say I'd fall in love with the sound of her laugh. It said we'd attend public events together. It didn't say I'd want to hold her hand even when no one was watching. It said we'd present a united front. It didn't say that front would become the most real thing in my life. He turned to Lena, whose eyes were streaming tears she wasn't bothering to wipe away. I'm not the most educated person in this room. I don't have an MBA or a trust fund or connections. What I have is 3 years of hard work in this building, a promotion I earned through documented performance improvements, and a wife I love more than I thought it was possible to love anyone after losing my first wife. You want to call this marriage fraud? Fine, but you're wrong. Because loving Lena isn't something I could fake if I tried. It's not something anyone could fake. He sat down, his heart racing. Lena gripped his hand so tightly he thought she might break bones. Margaret Chen cleared her throat. That was quite a statement, Mr. Cole. Lena, do you have anything to add? Lena stood, wiping her eyes, her voice steady despite the tears. Everything Ethan said is true. Our marriage began as a transaction, yes, but it became real so gradually we didn't even notice it happening. And you want to know the really ironic part? My father wrote that will clause because he didn't think I was strong enough to run this company alone. He thought I needed a husband to complete me, to validate me, to make me legitimate. But the truth is, I didn't need Ethan. I wanted him. I want him. And there's a huge difference. She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. So yes, you can vote me out. You can say I violated the spirit of the will, that my marriage is illegitimate, that I'm unfit to lead. But before you do, I want you to look at the numbers. Revenue is up 37% since I took over. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high. We've expanded into 3 new markets and acquired 2 competitors. This company is thriving under my leadership, and it has nothing to do with my marital status and everything to do with my competence. Competence gained through questionable ethics, Gavin said coldly. You lied to this board, Lena. You manipulated the system. I satisfied a ridiculous requirement the only way I could, Lena shot back. And speaking of questionable ethics, should we discuss your unauthorized access to company email systems? The funds you diverted from operational budgets? Your ongoing affair with a board member's wife, which violates company policy and creates a massive conflict of interest? The room went silent. James Henderson's face went purple. Gavin's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Marcus stood smoothly. We have documentation of all of Mr. Harrington's activities over the past 6 months. Emails showing corporate espionage, financial records showing embezzlement, and photographic evidence of his relationship with Mrs. Henderson. We were prepared to keep this confidential, but since Mr. Harrington has chosen to make this a public inquisition of his sister's personal life, we felt the board deserved full context. Gavin's confidence cracked. You have no right. We have every right, Marcus said calmly. You violated company policy, state law, and basic ethical standards. The question isn't whether Lena's marriage is legitimate. The question is whether you should retain any position at Harrington Media at all. The board dissolved into chaos. Margaret called for a recess. Gavin stormed out, his lawyer scrambling after him, and Lena sank into her chair, looking exhausted. That went well, she said weakly. Ethan pulled her close. You were incredible. We don't know how they'll vote. We know we told the truth. That's all we can control. They waited in a small conference room while the board deliberated. An hour passed, then 2. Ethan called Rachel to check on Sophie, told her everything was fine, tried to believe it himself. Finally, Marcus appeared in the doorway. They're ready. The boardroom felt different now, charged with decision. Margaret Chen stood, her expression neutral. After extensive deliberation, the board has reached a decision. First, regarding Gavin Harrington. Effective immediately, you are removed from all positions within Harrington Media Group. The evidence of misconduct is overwhelming and unacceptable. You'll receive severance as outlined in your contract, but you are barred from company premises and company business indefinitely. Gavin's face went white. You can't. We can, and we have. Security will escort you out. 2 security guards appeared,
Gavin looked at Lena, and for just a moment, Ethan saw something other than anger in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or the ghost of the brother he used to be. "I hope it was worth it," Gavin said quietly. "Destroying our family for a company Dad loved more than either of us." "I didn't destroy our family, Gavin," Lena said, her voice breaking. "You did. The moment you chose revenge over reconciliation." He left without another word, and the room felt lighter without him. Margaret turned to Lena.
As for you, the board acknowledges that your marriage began under unusual circumstances. However, we also acknowledge that the will clause requiring marriage was archaic and potentially discriminatory. Your performance as CEO has been exemplary. Your commitment to this company is unquestionable, and your personal life, frankly, is your own business. Lena's eyes widened. So the board votes unanimously to retain you as CEO. However, Margaret's expression turned stern. The financial contract with Mr. Cole must be dissolved within 30 days. If you choose to remain married, it must be without any financial incentive that could be construed as coercion or fraud. Are we clear?
"Crystal clear," Lena said, her voice shaking with relief. "Good. Then this meeting is adjourned. Lena, Ethan, congratulations on the board's decision and on your marriage, however it began. Sometimes the best things in life start from the most unlikely places."
They walked out of the boardroom in a daze. In the elevator, Lena turned to Ethan and started laughing, the kind of exhausted, relieved laughter that bordered on hysteria. "We did it," she said. We actually did it. You did it. That speech, our speech. You started it, I finished it. That's what partnerships do." The elevator doors opened on the ground floor, and there, waiting in the lobby, was Sophie, holding Rachel's hand and clutching Terry, the Triceratops. "Daddy! Lena!" Sophie ran to them, and they both crouched down to catch her. "Aunt Rachel said there was a big meeting, and I wanted to make sure you were okay." "We're perfect, baby girl," Ethan said, pulling her close. "Everything's perfect." Lena wrapped her arms around both of them, and for a moment they just stood there in the lobby of Cascade Tower, a family built on contracts and chaos and love that had surprised everyone, including themselves. "Can we get ice cream?" Sophie asked. "To celebrate?" "We can get all the ice cream," Lena promised. "Every flavor they have." As they walked out into the December afternoon, Ethan felt Lena's hand find his, their fingers threading together without thought. They'd survived the board, survived Gavin, survived the scrutiny and the doubt. Now they just had to figure out how to survive actually being married, without contracts or clauses or financial incentives. Somehow, Ethan thought, looking at Lena's smile and Sophie's joy, that would be the easy part. The ice cream celebration turned into an impromptu party at the penthouse. Rachel stayed, insisting on hearing every detail of the board meeting. Marcus and Jennifer stopped by with champagne, the expensive kind that Ethan was still getting used to seeing casually opened on a Wednesday afternoon. Sophie held court in the middle of it all, explaining to anyone who would listen how dinosaurs would have voted in board meetings if they'd had opposable thumbs and business degrees. "The T-Rex would definitely be CEO," she declared, chocolate ice cream rimming her mouth. "Because everyone's scared of them, but they're actually really smart." "Like Lena," Rachel said, grinning at Lena over her champagne glass. "I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an insult," Lena said, but she was smiling. "Definitely a compliment. You terrify people in the best way." Later, after everyone had left and Sophie was asleep, Ethan found Lena on the balcony. December wind whipped her hair around her face, and she was staring out at the city with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Hey," he said softly, joining her at the railing. "You okay?" "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to burst in and say there was a mistake, that the board changed their minds, that Gavin found another loophole." She turned to face him. "Is this really over?" "The board part is, but we still have to dissolve the contract within 30 days. Make this marriage real or end it. There's no question which one I want." Lena's hand found his. "But Ethan, we need to talk about what that means. No contract means no safety net. If this doesn't work, we won't. You can't know that. I can't know the future, but I know you. I know us. And I know that what we have is worth the risk." He pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her waist.
I've already lost one wife, Lena.
I know exactly how precious this is, how fragile, how easy it would be to take it for granted. I won't do that. I'll fight for us every single day if I have to. She buried her face in his chest. I'm going to be difficult. I'm going to work too hard and forget to communicate and probably try to solve all our problems by myself because that's what I've always done. And I'm going to call you on it. I'm going to remind you that you're not alone anymore, that partnerships mean actually partnering. We'll fight, we'll drive each other crazy, but we'll figure it out. He tilted her chin up. Together. Together, she echoed, and kissed him like it was a promise. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the penthouse with dissolution paperwork. They signed it at the kitchen table while Sophie ate cereal and narrated a battle between a stegosaurus and a plastic truck. And just like that, the contract is void, Marcus said, countersigning as witness.
Legally, you're still married, but there are no financial obligations, no term limits, no performance requirements. You're just married. Just married, Lena repeated like she was testing the words. That's terrifying. That's marriage, Marcus said with a slight smile. Welcome to what the rest of us experience. No contracts, no guarantees, just two people choosing each other every day. After he left, Ethan looked at Lena across the table. So, what do we do now? I have no idea. What do normal married couples do? Fight about whose turn it is to do dishes, argue about thermostat settings, build pillow forts with their kids? Sophie's head popped up. Pillow fort? Not right now, sweetheart. Finish your breakfast. But Daddy, you said pillow fort. Lena laughed, and the sound was lighter than Ethan had heard in weeks. I think we've been outvoted. Pillow fort it is.
They spent the morning building an elaborate fortress in the living room, using every pillow and blanket in the penthouse. Sophie directed the construction with the authority of a 4-year-old architect, while Lena and Ethan followed orders and tried not to laugh at how seriously she took the structural integrity of blanket walls. This is important, Daddy, Sophie said when Ethan suggested they might be overdoing it. If we don't build it right, the whole thing could collapse. She's got a point, Lena said. Structural engineering is crucial. You're both ridiculous. You married into this ridiculousness, Lena pointed out. No takebacks. The words hung in the air, heavier than she'd probably intended. No takebacks. They were really doing this, building a life together without safety nets or exit strategies, just faith and love and the hope that it would be enough. That afternoon, while Sophie napped in the pillow fort, Ethan and Lena sat on the couch and talked about logistics. Real logistics, not contractual ones. How to handle holidays. How to integrate their finances now that the contract was void. How to explain their relationship to Sophie in a way that honored both Emma's memory and their new reality. I don't want to replace Emma in Sophie's mind, Lena said carefully. She was Sophie's mother. That doesn't change. You're not replacing her. You're adding to Sophie's life. There's room for both. Ethan took Lena's hand. Emma would have liked you, I think. She always said I needed someone who'd challenge me, who wouldn't let me hide in routine. You're definitely that person. What was she like? Really like, not just the summary version. So Ethan told her. About Emma's terrible singing voice and her collection of silly socks. About how she'd cried at every single school play, even the bad ones, because she believed every kid deserved an audience who thought they were brilliant. About the way she'd fought the cancer with humor and grace until she couldn't anymore, and how she'd made Ethan promise to let himself be happy again. She sounds incredible, Lena said when he finished. She was. And so are you, just in completely different ways. He kissed Lena's temple. I'm allowed to have loved her and love you. They're not mutually exclusive. I know, but sometimes it feels like I'm intruding on something sacred. You're not intruding. You're building something new. Something that includes Emma's memory but isn't defined by it. He pulled Lena closer. You're my future, Lena. Emma was my past. Both of those things can be true. Work became easier after the board meeting. The news of Gavin's removal spread through the company, and with it, the speculation about Ethan and Lena's marriage settled into acceptance. People stopped whispering when Ethan walked by. His team started actually listening to his ideas instead of wondering if he was just Lena's pet project. And slowly, he began to feel like he'd earned his place instead of lucked into it. Frank, his old supervisor, stopped by his office one afternoon with coffee and a knowing smile. "You've done good, kid," Frank said, settling into the visitor's chair. "I wasn't sure about the promotion at first, not going to lie. Seemed convenient, but you've proven yourself. The building's running better than it has in years." "Thanks, Frank. That means a lot coming from you. Just don't forget where you came from. Stay humble, keep working hard, and don't let the executive floor turn you into one of those people who forgets what it's like in the basement." "Never," Ethan promised. The weeks leading up to Christmas were a blur of activity. Lena threw herself into year-end reports and strategic planning for the next quarter. Ethan managed a major HVAC upgrade that came in under budget and ahead of schedule. And Sophie prepared for her school's winter concert with the intensity of someone preparing for Carnegie Hall. "I have a solo," she announced one night at dinner. "Well, it's not really a solo. It's me and Tyler singing about reindeer, but I have 2 whole lines by myself." "That's amazing, sweetheart," Ethan said. "We'll be front row." "Both of you?" Sophie looked at Lena hopefully. "Both of us," Lena confirmed. "I've already blocked it on my calendar. Nothing short of a natural disaster could keep me away." Sophie beamed, and Ethan felt his heart swell. This, right here, this mundane conversation about school concerts and scheduling, this was the family he'd thought he'd lost forever when Emma died. Different, rebuilt, imperfect, but real. The concert was exactly as chaotic as expected. Kindergartners in reindeer antlers, first graders mangling jingle bells, second graders performing an interpretive dance about snowflakes that looked more like a mosh pit. And then Sophie, standing next to Tyler, singing about Rudolph with such earnest concentration that Lena grabbed Ethan's hand and didn't let go for the entire song. "She's incredible," Lena whispered, her eyes shining. "She is," Ethan agreed, his throat tight. After the concert, they took Sophie out for hot chocolate and let her talk nonstop about every moment of the performance. She was wired on sugar and adrenaline, gesturing wildly and reenacting the whole thing with sound effects. "Did you see when Tyler forgot his line and I had to whisper it to him? And did you see my smile? Mrs. Peterson said we should smile the whole time, so I smiled so much my face hurt." "We saw everything," Lena assured her. "You were the star of the show." "Really? Really?" Sophie launched herself at Lena, hugging her with the unselfconscious affection of a child who'd decided you were safe. And Lena hugged back, her eyes meeting Ethan's over Sophie's head, and in that moment they both knew this was it. This was the family they'd built from contracts and chaos and unexpected love. A week before Christmas, Ethan got a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Ethan Cole?" The voice was familiar but strained. "Gavin?" Lena looked up sharply from her laptop. Ethan put the call on speaker. "I wanted to talk," Gavin said. "In person, just the 2 of us. No lawyers, no witnesses, no Lena." "Why would I agree to that?" "Because I owe you an apology, and because I need to say some things that I can't say with my sister in the room." Ethan looked at Lena. She nodded slowly, though her expression was wary. "Fine," Ethan said. "Coffee, public place. Tomorrow morning." "Thank you." They met at a small cafe in Capitol Hill, far from Cascade Tower and the world of corporate intrigue. Gavin looked different, tired, humbled, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of his usual tailored suits. He stood when Ethan arrived, offered his hand. Ethan shook it cautiously. They ordered coffee and sat by the window, watching Seattle wake up on a gray December morning. "I've been seeing a therapist," Gavin said finally. "Court-mandated, actually, as part of the settlement with the board. But it's been helpful. Made me realize some things." "Like?" "Like I spent 20 years being angry at Lena for something that wasn't her fault. Dad loved her more because she was like him, ruthless, strategic, willing to sacrifice. I wasn't. I wanted to paint and write music and live a life that wasn't about quarterly earnings. And instead of accepting that we were just different, I blamed her, resented her, tried to destroy her." Ethan sipped his coffee, saying nothing. "You were right, what you said at Thanksgiving," Gavin continued, "about Lena caring more about the company in one day than I ever did. It's true. I never wanted it. I just didn't want her to have it either. And that's—" He laughed bitterly. "That's incredibly childish and destructive, and I'm ashamed of it." "Why are you telling me this?" Because you love her, really love her, not the way people in our world love, for connections or appearances or convenience. You see her, and you make her happy in a way I've never seen before. She smiles now, Ethan, real smiles, because of you and your daughter. Ethan's chest tightened. What do you want, Gavin? I want you to tell her I'm sorry. I want her to know that I'm leaving Seattle, starting over somewhere I can actually be who I am instead of who Dad wanted. And I want, his voice cracked, I want her to know that I hope she's happy, that I hope you both are, that you deserve it. Tell her yourself. She won't take my calls. Won't. And I don't blame her. Gavin stood, pulling on his coat. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to tell her that her little brother finally grew up. About 20 years too late, but still. He left money for both coffees and walked out into the rain. Ethan sat there for a long time, watching people hurry past with their umbrellas and their busy lives, and thought about family and forgiveness and all the ways people hurt each other trying to protect themselves. That night he told Lena about the conversation. She listened in silence, her expression unreadable. Do you believe him? She asked finally. I think he believes himself. Whether he'll actually change, Ethan shrugged. That's on him, but I think he's trying. Part of me wants to call him. Part of me never wants to speak to him again. Lena pulled her knees up to her chest, looking younger and more vulnerable than Ethan had ever seen her. He was my best friend once, before everything got complicated, before Dad pitted us against each other. I miss that, Gavin. Maybe someday you'll get him back. Maybe not. But that's a decision for future you. Tonight, you get to just feel whatever you feel about it. She leaned against him, and they sat like that for a while, processing and healing and letting go of things they couldn't control. Christmas came with surprising normalcy. They put up a tree. Sophie's first real tree, she informed them, since the past 2 years had been small artificial ones that Ethan could afford. Lena went overboard on decorations, admitting she'd never had a Christmas tree in the penthouse before and was making up for lost time. They baked cookies that were more burned than perfect. They watched holiday movies and drank too much cocoa and let Sophie stay up late because it was vacation and childhood was short. On Christmas Eve, after Sophie was asleep with visions of dinosaurs and Santa hats dancing in her head, Ethan and Lena sat by the tree, lights twinkling, city spread out below them. I got you something, Ethan said, pulling out a small wrapped box. It's not fancy, but Ethan, we said no gifts. We said no expensive gifts. This wasn't expensive. He handed her the box. Open it. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with 3 charms, a tiny book, a coffee cup, and a dinosaur. The book is because you're brilliant and you read more than anyone I've ever met, Ethan explained. The coffee is because you're deeply caffeine dependent and I love you anyway. And the dinosaur is from Sophie. She insisted. Lena's eyes filled with tears. It's perfect. Your turn, Ethan prompted. She pulled out an envelope, looking almost nervous. This is either the best gift or the worst, and I'm honestly not sure which. Inside was a legal document. Ethan scanned it, his heart starting to pound as he realized what he was reading. You're challenging the will clause, he said slowly, taking it to court. Marcus thinks we have a strong case. Gender discrimination, undue influence, violation of public policy. If we win, the clause gets struck down. Future CEOs won't have to deal with this archaic requirement. Lena twisted her hands together. I know it means opening up our relationship to more scrutiny, more legal proceedings, but I want Sophie to grow up in a world where women don't have to get married to prove they're capable of leadership. And I figured we've already survived one board inquisition. What's a little lawsuit? Ethan pulled her into his arms, kissing her hard. It's brilliant. You're brilliant. Let's burn that clause to the ground. Really? You're sure? Completely sure. Let's make sure no one else has to go through what you did. They spent Christmas morning watching Sophie tear through presents with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been promised dinosaurs and received dinosaurs. Lena had gotten her an entire paleontology kit, complete with dig tools and fossil replicas. Ethan had gotten her new books and art supplies, and together they'd gotten her a telescope, because apparently Sophie had decided the next frontier after dinosaurs was space. This is the best Christmas ever, Sophie declared, surveying her kingdom of gifts. Even better than when Mommy was here. The words hit Ethan like a truck. Sophie had never compared before, never ranked her life before and after Emma. He opened his mouth to say something. What? He wasn't sure. But Lena beat him to it. Your mom would be so happy to see how happy you are, Lena said gently. Christmas isn't about being better or worse than other years. It's about love and family and being together. And your mom's love is still part of that, even if she's not here. Sophie thought about this, then nodded seriously. That makes sense. Lena, are you my mom now? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Ethan's heart stopped. They'd discussed this, how to handle it when Sophie asked what language to use. But all the careful planning disappeared in the face of his daughter's earnest, trusting face. Lena knelt down to Sophie's level. I'm not your mom, sweetheart. You already have a mom, and she'll always be your mom. But I love you very much, and I'm going to be in your life for as long as you'll have me. What we call that, whether it's stepmom or Lena or something else entirely, that's up to you. Okay? Can I call you Lena, Mom? You can call me whatever feels right to you. Sophie hugged her, and over her head, Lena's eyes met Ethan's. He mouthed, I love you, and she smiled through tears. The lawsuit took months to wind through the courts. Marcus prepared an airtight case, documenting not just the gender discrimination inherent in the will clause, but the broader pattern of sexist requirements in corporate governance. They had expert witnesses, legal precedents, and public opinion on their side. The Harrington board supported them, perhaps motivated by the publicity nightmare of opposing gender equality in the #MeToo era. Patricia testified about watching her brother's sexism poison his relationship with his daughter. Jeremy spoke about the company culture that had changed under Lena's leadership, becoming more inclusive and diverse. And in March, nearly 3 months after they'd filed, the judge ruled in their favor. The will clause was struck down as discriminatory and unenforceable. Future CEOs of Harrington Media would be evaluated on merit, not marital status. Lena cried when Marcus called with the news. Not the quiet, controlled tears Ethan had seen before, but gut-wrenching sobs of relief and vindication and grief for everything she'd sacrificed to get here. It's over, she said, clinging to Ethan. It's finally over. Not over, Ethan corrected. Just beginning. You're free now, really free. They celebrated that night with champagne and takeout and Sophie's interpretive dance about justice, which involved a lot of spinning and one dramatic collapse onto the couch. Spring came early to Seattle that year, bringing cherry blossoms and longer days and a sense of renewal. Ethan's work at Harrington had expanded. He was now overseeing sustainability initiatives, working with architects on a green building retrofit that would make the Cascade Tower a model for energy efficiency. Lena was being courted by national media as a spokesperson for corporate governance reform, and Sophie was thriving, her vocabulary expanding to include words like litigation and precedent alongside triceratops and asteroid. One Saturday morning in April, Ethan woke early and couldn't fall back asleep. He left Lena sleeping and made coffee, standing at the windows as sunrise painted the city gold. They'd been legally married for 6 months. Really married, in his heart, where it counted, for almost as long. But they'd never had a wedding, a real one, not the courthouse signing with tired witnesses. They'd never made promises in front of people they loved, never celebrated the choice they'd made to build a life together. The idea took root and grew. By the time Lena emerged from the bedroom, yawning and gorgeous in one of his old t-shirts, Ethan had made a decision. Morning, she mumbled, beelining for coffee. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, too busy planning. Planning what? Our wedding. Lena nearly dropped her coffee mug. Our what? We never had a real wedding. I want to marry you again, properly this time. With Sophie as our flower girl and all our friends watching, and vows that we actually write instead of letting a judge recite. What do you think? I think... Lena set down her coffee and crossed to him, cupping his face in her hands. I think that's the best idea you've ever had. They planned it together over the next 2 months. Not a big wedding, neither of them wanted that. Just 50 people on the rooftop of Cascade Tower at sunset, with the city spread out below them and the people who mattered most bearing witness. Rachel helped Sophie pick out a dress, purple, because Sophie had declared that flower girls should look like royalty, and royalty wore purple. Marcus offered to officiate, surprising everyone by revealing he was a certified celebrant. Jennifer handled logistics with the efficiency of someone planning a military operation. And Lena and Ethan wrote their vows late at night, reading them to each other and laughing and crying and rewriting until the words felt right. The day before the wedding, Ethan took Sophie to visit Emma's grave. They hadn't been in months. Ethan had been avoiding it, unsure how to reconcile his new happiness with the grief that still caught him unexpectedly. They sat in the grass, Sophie arranging flowers she'd picked from the penthouse garden. "Mommy, this is Terry," Sophie said to the headstone, holding up her beloved Triceratops. "He's my favorite. And tomorrow, Daddy's marrying Lena for real. I'm the flower girl. I get to wear a purple dress and everything." Ethan's throat tightened. "Sophie, you know it's okay if you're sad about this, right? About Daddy marrying someone else?" Sophie looked at him with those old soul eyes. "I'm not sad, Daddy. I'm happy. Mommy would want you to be happy." "How do you know?" "Because that's what love is. Wanting people to be happy even when you can't be there." She patted his hand. "Mrs. Peterson told us that. And Mommy loved you a lot, so she'd want you to be happy with Lena." Ethan pulled his daughter close and let himself cry. For Emma, for the life they'd lost, for the gratitude that he'd been given a second chance at love. "I think your mom would have really liked Lena," he said finally. "Me too. They both give really good hugs." That evening, following tradition despite having already lived together for months, Ethan stayed at Rachel's apartment while Lena and Sophie had a girls' night at the penthouse. He lay awake on Rachel's uncomfortable couch, thinking about the journey that had brought him here, from that collision in the maintenance hallway to tomorrow, when he'd marry Lena again with intention and joy and no contracts binding them to anything except love. "You're happy," Rachel said, appearing with tea and a knowing smile. "Really happy." "Yeah, I am." "Emma would be glad. She always said you deserved someone extraordinary. I got that twice in one lifetime. I'm the luckiest man alive." The wedding day dawned perfect. Clear skies, warm sun, a breeze that carried the scent of cherry blossoms. The rooftop was transformed with white chairs and string lights and flowers everywhere. Guests arrived in waves, Patricia and Jeremy looking proud, Jennifer and Marcus looking pleased with their logistical triumph, Ethan's friends from the maintenance department dressed in their best and grinning, Lena's executive team clearly delighted to see their CEO happy. Ethan stood at makeshift altar, Marcus beside him, and watched the elevator doors. His heart pounded. They were already married, he reminded himself. This was just ceremony, but it felt bigger than that. It felt like the beginning of something true. The music started. Tyler appeared first, carrying rings on a pillow with intense concentration. Then Sophie, scattering rose petals with dramatic flair, her purple dress swishing. She caught Ethan's eye and grinned, giving him a thumbs up. And then Lena. She wore a simple ivory dress that caught the evening light, her hair loose around her shoulders, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. She wasn't walking alone. Patricia had her arm, smiling through tears. As they approached, Ethan saw Lena's eyes shining, saw her mouth trembling with emotion, and his own eyes blurred. Patricia kissed Lena's cheek and placed her hand in Ethan's. "Take care of each other," she whispered. "We will," they said together. Marcus cleared his throat. "Friends, we're gathered here today to witness something extraordinary. Not just a marriage, but a testament to the power of unexpected love. Ethan and Lena are already legally married, but today they've chosen to make promises in front of all of you. Promises not required by law or contract, but by love. Ethan, would you like to begin?" Ethan took both of Lena's hands, his prepared words dissolving as he looked at her. "I was going to make a speech about how you saved me, about how you gave Sophie and me stability and hope when we were drowning. But that's not quite right. You didn't save me. You reminded me that I could save myself. You showed up in my life like a force of nature and challenged me to be more than I thought I could be. You learned to make terrible scrambled eggs because they made Sophie happy. You left Post-it notes on my mirror with ridiculous jokes because you knew they'd make me smile. You fought for our family, not just in boardrooms, but in all the small daily ways that actually matter. I love you, Lena. Not because you're brilliant or successful or beautiful, though you're all those things. I love you because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be fully alive. And I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget how extraordinary you are.
Lena was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it. She took a shaky breath and began. Ethan, 6 months ago, I didn't believe in love. I thought it was a weakness, a distraction, something that made you vulnerable. And then you crashed into me in a maintenance hallway and refused $200. And somehow that changed everything. You saw me, really saw me, not as a CEO or a Harrington or a means to an end, but as a person. You were patient when I pushed you away. You were honest when I tried to hide. You loved me at my worst and believed I could be better. And Sophie, her voice broke. Sophie, you taught me that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about showing up and trying and learning to make dinosaur-shaped pancakes, even though they always come out looking like blobs. I promise to love you both fiercely and imperfectly.
I promise to keep trying even when I'm scared. I promise to be the partner you deserve and the parent Sophie needs. And I promise that whatever comes, we'll face it together. There wasn't a dry eye on the rooftop. Marcus was openly sniffling as he pronounced them married. Again. And when Ethan kissed Lena, when Sophie cheered and everyone applauded, it felt like the world was celebrating with them. The reception was perfect chaos. Sophie and Tyler led an impromptu conga line. Patricia gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. Rachel cornered Lena and made her promise to take care of her brother or face sisterly wrath. And as sunset painted the sky purple and gold, Ethan and Lena stood at the edge of the rooftop watching their family celebrate. "Do you remember that day?" Lena asked softly. "In the maintenance corridor?" "How could I forget? You looked terrifying." "I was terrified. Of losing control, of failing, of being alone forever." She leaned against him. "And then this maintenance worker with sad eyes and integrity returned my envelope and somehow became my whole world. Best collision of my life. Mine too." Sophie ran up, dragging Tyler. "Daddy! Lena! We're playing tag and you have to play because it's your wedding and you have to do what the flower girl says." "That's not how weddings work, sweetheart," Ethan said. "It is now. Come on." They played tag on the rooftop of Cascade Tower as the stars came out, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. And later, much later, after the guests had left and Sophie had fallen asleep in Rachel's guest room and Ethan and Lena returned to the penthouse, they stood at their bedroom window and looked out at the city that had witnessed their transformation. "What do you think happens next?" Lena asked. "Life? Boring, beautiful, ordinary life. Work and school concerts and arguments about whose turn it is to do laundry. Maybe we'll fight sometimes, maybe we'll struggle, but we'll do it together." "Together," Lena agreed. "I like the sound of that." "Me too." They went to bed that night truly married, not by contract or convenience, but by choice. And in the morning, they'd wake up and start again, building their imperfect, beautiful life one day at a time. 6 months later, the lawsuit against the will clause became a landmark case, cited in corporate governance reforms across the country. Lena was invited to speak at universities and conferences, sharing their story, carefully edited but honest, about fighting discrimination and building something real from unexpected circumstances. Ethan's sustainability initiatives won national awards, and Cascade Tower became the first commercial building in Seattle to achieve net zero energy consumption. He was promoted to Director of Operations, earning the position through documented achievement and respect from his team. And Sophie started kindergarten, where she informed her teacher on the first day that she had 2 moms, one who lived in her heart and one who lived in her house. And that was perfectly normal. Thank you very much. As for Gavin, he sent a Christmas card that year from Portland, where he'd opened a small art gallery and was apparently dating a painter. The card was brief. "I'm working on being better. Hope you're all well. G." Lena kept it on her desk, not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of letting go. On their first anniversary, the real one from the rooftop wedding, Ethan took Lena back to the maintenance corridor where they'd first met. He'd gotten permission from building security and set up a small table with champagne and the world's most mediocre takeout. "What are we doing here?" Lena asked, laughing. "Commemorating the spot where everything changed." He pulled out a manila envelope. "Here, drop this." "Ethan, just do it." She dropped it. He picked it up, handed it back. "Thank you," Lena said, playing along. "You're welcome. Would you like some money for your trouble?" "No, thank you." "Why not?" "Because you're either the most honest man in Seattle or the most foolish, and either way, I find you fascinating." Ethan grinned. "Want to get married?" "We're already married, you idiot." "I know, but I'd marry you again, and again, every day for the rest of our lives." Lena kissed him there in the maintenance corridor, in the place where a collision had become a connection, where a contract had become a love story, where two broken people had found a way to become whole. They went home to Sophie, who was teaching Rachel's new girlfriend about the Cretaceous period. They ordered pizza and watched movies and fell asleep on the couch, tangled together, exactly like a real family. Because that's what they were. Not despite the unusual beginning, but because of it. They'd chosen each other when they didn't have to, loved each other when it would have been easier to walk away, and built something true from the flimsiest of foundations. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. The contract was gone, burned away in legal fire and truth. What remained was something no clause could capture and no board could judge. A family built on choice, sustained by love, and bound by the simple, radical decision to keep showing up for each other, day after ordinary, extraordinary day. That was their happily ever after. Not perfect, never perfect, but real, and theirs, and more than enough.